Chapter 793. Welcome, everyone. Luo Fan didn't care about them at all. He quickly passed through the thick layer of colorful light and came into contact with the surface of the sphere. First written text. Although the surface of the sphere was filled with even denser five-colored light that condensed into various shapes such as land, mountains, and rivers, it was directly torn apart by this passage, revealing the sphere that was covered by the five-colored light. As soon as it was torn apart, Luo Fan couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The size of the sphere was actually not thousands of kilometers in diameter as he had imagined, but only less than 5 kilometers in diameter. Outside the 5-kilometer diameter sphere, there was a thick layer of light that seemed to be thousands of kilometers in diameter. It was the unimaginably condensed light of the 5,832nd immortal realm. Due to the thick layer of five-colored light that was thousands of kilometers thick, it wrapped around the sphere that was 10 kilometers in diameter, making it seem like the sphere was thousands of kilometers in diameter. The degree of condensation of this five-colored brilliance was beyond imagination, almost becoming a real substance. Thus, for a moment it actually fooled Luo Fan, causing him to mistakenly think that this magic treasure was thousands of miles in diameter. While moving forward in the passage, Luo Fan sensed the surrounding layer formed by the five-colored brilliance, comprehending the mysteries of the magic treasure contained within. The deeper he went, the more he felt that the magic treasure was not simple, and the more he wanted to seize it. With his speed, thousands of kilometers was only a matter of a few breaths. After a few breaths, Luo Fan had already stepped onto the body of the magic treasure. Although the magic treasure's diameter was hundreds of times smaller than it looked on the surface, in fact, it was still quite large. At the very least, Luo Fan's body was like a black dot on a ping-pong ball on top of such a magical weapon. This magic treasure was a multicolored sphere, and its surface was engraved with countless curved lines. The 8,332nd immortal realm. These lines were extremely complicated, and according to some unimaginable method, they outlined an unimaginably complex system. This system was incomparably mysterious. It seemed to be resonating with countless laws and laws from afar. Every single tremble of the system, every movement, every change could cause certain rules and laws to change. With a thought, Luo Fan's body had already stepped onto the sphere. At that moment, the magic treasure with a diameter of 5 kilometers trembled slightly. Then, millions of fluctuations were emitted from the magic treasure and swept across his body. These fluctuations were extremely mysterious detection fluctuations, as if they wanted to discover all the mysteries inside and outside of Luo Fan's body. Luo Fan's mind raced, and in the blink of an eye, he already understood that these countless fluctuations were not harmful to him at all. This should be the magic treasure's method of finding an inheritor. Therefore, he did not stop these fluctuations and let them sweep inside and outside of his body. In any case, there was nothing hidden about his body at this moment. Everything about him was completely like some kind of genius of the great Tianyuan world. It was impossible for a 7th-tier magic treasure to discover his true secret. In the end, all the fluctuations retreated, and a door made of 5-colored light slowly opened in front of Luo Fan. Finally, all the fluctuations retreated, and a door made of 5-colored light slowly opened in front of Luo Fan. With a slight sense, Luo Fan knew that this door did not lead to a real place, but to an illusion. It led to a spiritual dwelling. With a thought, a strand of his will directly poured into the door made of 5-colored light. As soon as he entered, he heard a voice filled with endless vicissitudes, containing an aura of endless years. A voice that seemed to come from an immeasurably long time ago resounded, "Successor, since you are recognized by the heavenly Tao Pearl, no matter what kind of living being you are qualified to be the Venerable One's inheritor." Luo Fan's will condensed into a figure, and when he looked around, he found that he had appeared in a fairyland. The world here was boundlessly vast, and the sky was filled with 5-colored clouds. The ground was filled with countless strange flowers and plants, as well as divine beasts and spiritual medicines. The world was filled with endless natural vitality. Where he stood, the natural vitality seemed to have condensed into a solid form, forming a luxurious building. The person who spoke was an old man standing in front of him. Although the old man was only standing in front of him, the entire world and the endless buildings around him seemed to be born and destroyed because of the old man's will. The endless strange flowers and plants, divine beasts and spiritual medicines, and the endless natural vitality seemed to revolve around the old man. They were all born and destroyed because of the old man's will. When the old man spoke, the entire space-time and the entire world trembled subtly, as if they were echoing his words, and also as if they were naturally changing due to the change in his tone. Luo Fan looked at the old man and instantly knew that this was just an insignificant projection of a living being. It could not even be considered a clone of that living being, and it could not even compare to a trace of that living being's will. However, this projection could already emit an aura that surpassed this world and the Stage 9 immortal realm. Tired? Strong? Difficult to Gu Luo Wei Yu and Song Duan Lu? Dream? Mechanical grade Johann Na Bo Tu? Impatient to travel on the earth in a hurry? This person is at least at the peak of Zenith Heaven Metal Path. Only such an existence can make me feel this way with just a little will. Luo Fan instantly made a judgment. I'm Luo Fan. Greetings, Senior. May I know how to address you, Senior? However, although he had made a judgment, his expression did not change at all. He only bowed and said. Although this was just a projection, Luo Fan believed that an existence that could produce such a powerful aura, and even cause his body and mind to be blocked, was definitely not someone that could not be communicated with. I'm Tao Master 5 Elements, and my successor is Luo Fan. Although you're already a Stage 7 immortal, it seems that you haven't really chosen a path. It's just right for you to inherit the Tao of 5 Element. Are you willing to inherit this Tao? The old man's expression did not change, and he did not seem to be in the mood to talk to Luo Fan. After a few words, he changed the topic. Luo Fan smiled and said, So it's Tao Master 5 Elements. I haven't really chosen a path, and I'm choosing a path that's most suitable for me and has the best future. Although the Tao Master's Tao of 5 Elements must be mysterious and unpredictable, I don't know if it's suitable for me. I wonder if the Tao Master can tell me more about this Tao? The old man frowned and carefully looked at Luo Fan. After a while, he said, Since you're not interested in inheriting the Tao of 5 Elements, why are you looking for the Tao Master's inheritance? At this moment, the old man's words were a little more lively. It seemed that because Luo Fan's answer was out of the ordinary, he had no choice but to talk to him. I'm here to find my own Tao. Yes, I'm looking for my own path. If Venerable Lord is willing, I wonder if I can have an exchange with you. Luo Fan was completely relaxed at this moment. You're an interesting successor. The old man suddenly smiled and said, The Tao Master is overpraising me. Luo Fan also smiled. The old man smiled and casually waved his hand, and the surrounding world changed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a boundless starry sky, and 2 futons appeared under them. Fine. I've existed for billions of years, and I've never communicated with real living beings. Since you're interested, I'll discuss the Tao with you. The old man smiled and made an inviting gesture. He directly sat on the futon. Luo Fan did not stand on ceremony. He was also sitting cross-legged on the praying mat that had appeared beneath him. The Tao Master has existed for billions of years. I wonder if the Tao Master's main body still exists? Luo Fan asked after sitting down. The Tao Master's main body. The old man's eyes showed a little confusion. After a while, he continued, when the Tao Master's main body went to break through to the Saint Realm, he left the inheritance of the mixed essence Tao realm here. It's been billions of years, but the inheritance hasn't been taken back. Maybe he failed and died, Or maybe he's still on the way. Hearing this, Luo Fan's eyes lit up. I see. I wonder if the Tao Master can explain to me how to break through to the Saint Realm? Hearing this, the Tao Master of 5 Elements laughed. So you, the successor, have such ambition. Not bad, not bad. No wonder you haven't chosen a path even after reaching the peak of the 7th stage. Luo Fan was not embarrassed. He smiled and said, which cultivator in this world doesn't have the dream of becoming a saint? That's right, that's right. If it wasn't for becoming a saint, almost none of the countless Tao Masters in this world can live for more than 1 trillion years. Why would the Tao Master's main body leave the Tao Master here? The old man's expression was a little strange, and his words became a little chaotic. Although the words were a little chaotic, Luo Fan did not care. Instead, he would rather the words become more chaotic, because chaos was not an obstacle for him to understand, and he could reveal a lot of information he needed in his chaotic word. I hope the Tao Master can give me some pointers. When the old man's expression gradually calmed down, Luo Fan could smell it. The old man did not lament anymore. He said, there are countless ways to break through to the Saint Realm. But for Tao Masters who have surpassed the 9th stage, there is only one most convenient and direct way, and that is to set foot on the road to the Saint Realm. As long as you can reach the end of the road, you will naturally be a saint. The road to the Saint Realm? Luo Fan's eyes widened and he cried out in surprise. Was it so easy to prove one's Tao and become a saint? Could it be that one only needed to take one road? How was this possible? One must know that the Saint Realm was a realm that could not be worn down by thousands of tribulations. It was eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipotent. This realm was tens of thousands of times more powerful than even the creatures who had surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. Could it be that such a huge gap could be overcome just by walking a single path? In an instant, Luo Fan denied it in his heart for the first time. No matter how dangerous or long a path was, there would definitely be a limit and an end. It was simply wishful thinking to comprehend the path of the saint through this path. However, he could not accept it no matter what. He could not believe it. As Luo Fan thought so, his expression returned to normal. Although the old man had not communicated with real creatures for tens of trillions of years since he was born, he still had the supreme power that surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. Therefore, he easily discovered the meaning of the change in Luo Fan's expression. He could not help but laugh and said, "Successor, do you not believe in the existence of the road to the Saint Realm? I dare not hide it from you, Taoist Master. I really find it hard to believe. The gap between the Saint Realm and the immortal realm, and even the gap between the 9th stage of the immortal realm, is almost infinite. It is impossible to overcome this infinite gap by relying on a road, no matter how you think about it," Luo Fan said. Frog at the bottom of a well. The old man smiled and commented on Luo Fan. Luo Fan was not angry. At his current realm, his Taoist heart had already reached an unshakable level. A little verbal attack could not affect him at all. Obviously, the old man did not want to see Luo Fan angry. This evaluation was obviously his real evaluation of Luo Fan. Therefore, after he finished speaking, he continued, "An ordinary road naturally cannot allow a Taoist master to overcome the infinite gap and become a saint realm. But what if this road is in the chaos?" In the chaos? Luo Fan's eyes lit up. If this road is in the chaos, then, it seems possible. That seems to be a real possibility. He murmured as his eyes flashed crazily. Countless lights flashed in his mind and constantly changed. The state of chaos was a supreme existence that he could not understand at all. Although he could not understand the state of primal chaos, he knew that even a saint was an insignificant existence, even in the great Tianyuan world. Even in the great Tianyuan world, he was just an insignificant dot there, and could even be destroyed. It was easy to imagine just how profound and mighty this supreme existence was. If there was a road to the Saint Realm in any world, no matter what, Luo Fan would not believe it. But if the road to the Saint Realm appeared in the state of chaos where anything could happen, it did not seem to be a fantasy. Yes, the beginning of the road to the Saint Realm is somewhere in the world. But the body of the road is completely in the state of chaos. Embarking on the road to the Saint Realm is equivalent to embarking on the road to understanding the chaos. As long as one can walk the road to the Saint Realm, it is equivalent to understanding the mystery of chaos enough to become a saint. Naturally, one can become a saint, Tao Master 5 Elements said with longing and sadness in his eyes. Luo Fan could completely understand his longing and sadness. Longing was the longing that every living creature, even the projection of power, had for the Saint Realm. But he was sad because he understood that he was just someone's projection, a shadow. Even if he seemed to have the divine power that surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm, it was just an illusion. He could never become a saint, and it was impossible for him to step into the Saint Realm. I wonder where the entrance to the road to the Saint Realm is. Please tell me, Tao Master. Luo Fan bowed to the ground and said, "A latecomer. I have already felt your sincerity. Unfortunately, you do not know where the entrance to the road to the Saint Realm is," the old man sighed. "May I ask why?" Luo Fan stood up and asked in shock. This old man was a projection of Tao Master 5 Elements, a shadow. The reason why Tao Master 5 Elements left him here was because he knew where the road to the Saint Realm was. Therefore, he planned on finding the opportunity to become a saint and left behind this inheritance. If that was the case, how could Tao Master 5 Elements not know where the road to the Saint Realm was? If he didn't know, how could he find the opportunity to become a saint? However, he naturally wouldn't think that the old man was lying to him. After all, it was meaningless. Therefore, he asked in shock and not in doubt. "I wonder if you have heard of this saying, if you don't become a Tao Master, it will be difficult to walk the Saint Realm?" The old man sighed. "I have not." Luo Fan frowned. What does that mean? It was indeed the first time that Luo Fan had heard of this saying. He had heard countless things about the great Tianyuan world from the human venerable, but the human venerable was only at the level of a disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven. Although he was a disciple of a saint in the great Tianyuan world, he could barely be considered to have set foot in the upper echelons of the cultivation world, not even the top. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for him to clearly know all the secrets of the great Tianyuan world. And Luo Fan had heard all kinds of things about the great Tianyuan world from the human venerable. Naturally, he didn't know the secrets that the human venerable didn't know. "Oh, I almost forgot that you are only at the 7th stage of the celestial realm. In our time, only those who have surpassed the 9th stage of the celestial realm would know this," the old man said suddenly. Hearing this, Luo Fan could only nod at the side. How could he say anything else? The old man didn't wait for Luo Fan to reply and continued, "Ordinary people only know that the celestial realm is divided into 9 stages, and at most they know that each stage is divided into 9 grades. But they don't know that above the 9 stages below the Saint Realm there are still 5 stages. These 5 stages are Perishing Realm, Understanding Void, Fusing Path, Transcendence, and Tao Master. Among them, advancing each stage is more than 100 times more difficult than breaking through from the 1st stage of the celestial realm to the 9th stage of the celestial realm." Listening to the old man explain the stages after breaking through the 9th stage of the celestial realm, Luo Fan suddenly felt that a door leading to another world had opened in front of him. He had always felt that although the great Tianyuan world stages were divided into 9 stages and 9 grades of the celestial realm, compared to such a perfect world with such a long history, and such a long history, this kind of stage division was still a little crude, and it couldn't match this big world. Now that he heard about the stages above the 9th stage of the celestial realm, he suddenly felt that perhaps only by breaking through the 9th stage of the celestial realm could he be considered to have truly set foot on the path of Tao. And these 5 stages above the 9th stage of the celestial realm, each of them had only 2 words in their names, but they seemed to contain many mysteries of cultivation and many secrets of becoming a sage. In a trance, he felt that the heavy fog that had covered him seemed to show signs of dispersing. Chapter 794. No one knows where the path to sainthood came from. Perhaps it was built by the combined efforts of the sages, or perhaps it was built by the gods who created the world. In short, when any living being steps into the annihilation realm, they will naturally know of the holy road's existence. If one does not become a Tao master, it will be difficult to walk the holy road. The elder continued to explain. His eyes were filled with reminiscence. However, although one can know of the holy road's existence as long as one steps into the annihilation realm, no matter what one's identity is, one can only know where the entrance to the holy road is after becoming a Tao master. Without becoming a Tao master, even a disciple of a sage will not know where the entrance to the holy road is. When Your Excellency became a Tao master, you naturally knew the entrance to the path to sainthood. But Your Excellency was only the 833rd incarnation of Your Excellency. Even if Your Excellency's other memories are the same as Your Excellency's, you still don't know where the entrance to the path to sainthood is. Luo Fan heard the elder's words and felt a little regretful. A path that would allow one to comprehend the way of the sage and break through the shackles of the immortal realm to become a sage was something that he looked forward to and yearned for. How could he not feel regretful when he heard that he had to wait until he reached the 5th realm above the immortal realm? However, although it was regretful, he also knew that this was the only reasonable way. If such a mysterious path was known to all, how could a mortal master who was a disciple of a sage not know about it? How could he not know about it? Thank you for your explanation, Tao Master. Your words have really broadened my horizons. Luo Fan bowed to the elder and said. At this moment, there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. It was as if he had seen through many things that he could not see before. The elder seemed to have recovered from his emotions and said, There is no need to be so polite. I am the projection of my body's inheritance, so I will naturally inherit my body's way. I will now pass on to you the way of the 5 elements that my body cultivate. If you are willing to cultivate the 833rd projection, you can cultivate it. If you are not willing to cultivate it, you can also gain some enlightenment. Luo Fan smiled and said, Thank you, Tao Master. However, I do not know what request you have. As a cultivator, he had matured enough to embark on the path of becoming a sage. In order to break through to the sage realm, everything in the outside world besides the sage realm, even the rank 9 magic treasures, were meaningless to him. There wasn't much difference between them and nothingness. At least, if Luo Fan reached that realm, everything else would be the same for him. Under such circumstances, Tao Master 5 Element had left behind such a legacy. How could Luo Fan believe that this was the legacy of the cultivation method and the sect? Because of this, he wanted to know what Tao Master 5 Element needed the inheritor to do, which was why he had left the inheritance here. Is it that hard to guess what the body wants? Others might not be able to guess it, but can't you guess it as well? The old man didn't directly answer and instead asked a question. I should know. Luo Fan muttered to himself. Within a few breaths, he came to a sudden realization. I see. Looks like I was thinking too much. I already know what the Tao Venerable want. I will not let you down. After the realization, he smiled and said. Through thinking, he thought about what would happen if he wanted to leave the inheritance in the same state as Tao Master 5 Element. With such a change in perspective, he naturally came to a sudden realization and knew what it was. If he had reached that realm, he would not care about anything else in the outside world, even if it was a rank 9 magic weapon. The only thing he would think about was breaking through the immortal realm and becoming a sage realm. Therefore, if he wanted to leave the inheritance, he would definitely do it to help him break through the immortal realm and become a sage realm. Guessing from this goal, the purpose of Tao Master 5 Elements inheritance was very obvious. It was nothing more than to let the successor obtain his inheritance and cultivate the supreme divine sense. Similarly, after becoming a Tao Master and stepping into the sage realm, he would be able to bring some help to himself. At least, they would have to support each other. In order to go further on the road to becoming a sage, there was such a possibility. It was quite difficult to say how likely this plan would succeed. After all, he did not know when the inheritance would be obtained, what kind of mentality the person would have, whether the person would become a Tao Master, or embark on the road to becoming a sage. Even if the inheritance was obtained by someone else in a short period of time, the inheritor would be grateful and wholeheartedly help him. What's more, the inheritor would become a Tao Master and embark on the road to becoming a sage. In the end, the chances of meeting him on the road to becoming a sage were extremely slim. All of these uncertainties made the possibility of the plan succeeding almost minuscule, almost to the point that it was impossible to succeed. However, there was still a slight chance of success in theory. The road to becoming a sage was a road that had no end, a road that transcended the mortal world. Walking on such a road, any possible help could not be given up. If he gave up because he felt that the possibility of success was minuscule, wouldn't it be a waste if he failed because he lacked the slightest possibility of success? Wouldn't it be a waste if his hundreds of millions of years of bitter training turned to naught? It was precisely because of this that even if the possibility of success was slim, a wise cultivator would never give up. What's more, leaving behind an inheritance was nothing for a cultivator who was about to embark on the road to becoming a sage. Even leaving behind millions of inheritances was just a matter of a thought. How could a cultivator who was about to embark on the road to becoming a sage be stingy? Hearing Luo Fan's words, the old man laughed and said, "Latecomer, you are indeed smart. It seems that I can teach you the most essential way of cultivation." Luo Fan thought about it and understood many things that he had never thought about before. Tao Master 5 Elements was not without consideration. If he did not know the true meaning of a Tao Master, and did not know why the inheritance was left here, it meant that even if he obtained the inheritance, it was unlikely that he would go to the road to becoming a sage to help Tao Master 5 Elements. In that case, he would definitely not be able to obtain the true inheritance of Tao Master 5 Element. Perhaps he would gain a lot, but it would be difficult to obtain the essence. This was not a complicated plan, but it gave Luo Fan a wake-up call. If he had such a plan, he would definitely be prepared for it. That was what he thought, but his face did not change much. The old man stopped laughing and did not do anything else. He said, "The Tao that the body cultivates is the Tao of the 5 Element. This Tao is extremely subtle. It reaches the origin of the world. If cultivated to the peak, it will be able to split open the chaos and recreate a world of the 5 Element. It is the supreme Tao of creation." Luo Fan's eyes lit up. Any cultivation method that could help one become a Tao Master must be so subtle that it was unimaginable. The Tao of the 5 Elements could allow Tao Master 5 Elements to step into the realm of Tao Master. Finally embarking on the road to becoming a sage, there was naturally no need to say more about the profound mysteries. If you cannot see through the Tao Master's plan, he can only teach you the Tao of the heavens so that you can surpass the 9th stage of the immortal realm. In the end, the best-case scenario is to create a world that surpasses the vast 1,000 realms in the great Tianyuan world. He will not teach you the Tao of the beyond heavens so that you can recreate a world in the chaos, the old man said. Luo Fan did not feel relieved when he heard this. Instead, he was slightly puzzled. This method is separated into the heavens and the beyond heavens? In that case, the five elements world created in the chaos should be a perfect world. Since there is such a method, the Tao Master can cultivate it directly and create a world in the chaos. Why would he need to embark on the road to becoming a sage? He did not hide his doubts at all. He said it out loud as soon as he thought of it. You are a newcomer. You think too simply. The Tao body of the five elements has been created long ago. It has even been perfected because it has seen many sage arts, but that is only a cultivation method. Creating a perfect cultivation method and actually cultivating it are two completely different realms. The old man chuckled. Luo Fan understood when he heard this. He had taken it for granted. Although the Tao of the five elements could create a foundation in the chaos and create a perfect world like when the great Tianyuan world was first created, it was not easy to reach that realm. However, it was absolutely not an easy task to reach that level, to truly attain that supreme divine ability, and to possess that unbelievable might. Pangu, who created the world, was so powerful. After he created the untainted world, he turned into all living things and completely integrated into the untainted world. The Tao of the five elements could create a perfect world in the chaos. The cultivator must at least be as powerful as Pangu, or even several times more powerful than Pangu. Otherwise, the Tao of the five elements would become a suicidal path. It was obvious that in order to cultivate Pangu's powerful divine ability at the immortal realm, one had to be extremely powerful. It was definitely something that was close to impossible. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to reach the peak of the way of the five elements, the way of the outer world, and finally be able to split the world in the state of chaos, directly comprehend the mysteries of indestructibility and immortality, and directly reach the saint realm. It was almost impossible. Therefore, if one wanted to cultivate such a method and reach the sage realm, he had to find another way. The way to become a sage was obviously that other way. After thinking this through, Luo Fan's expression was no longer doubtful. Instead, he came to a sudden realization. When the old man saw Luo Fan's expression, he seemed to be quite pleased. However, he didn't praise Luo Fan and continued, "The five elemental Taos within the heavens method is a rank 1 cultivation method. Once you master it, you will become a rank 1 immortal. At the peak, one can break through to the 9th stage of the immortal realm. The Tao of the Beyond Heaven is a cultivation method that surpasses the first grade. As long as one reaches the intermediate level, one can break through to the 9th stage of the immortal realm. If one can cultivate it to the profound level, it will be easy to become a Tao Master. However, if you want to cultivate it to perfection and reach the peak, you'll need a supreme opportunity. Even the Creator doesn't know how it'll be possible to reach this step. A first-grade immortal was an immortal at every stage of the immortal realm. In other words, at the first stage of the immortal realm, one would be a first-grade immortal. A second-grade immortal would be a second-grade immortal, and so on. Each stage of the immortal realm was divided into 9 grades. Among them, the difference between the lower 3 grades and the middle 3 grades was like the difference between heaven and earth. Immortals in the middle 3 grades could definitely treat those in the lower 3 grades like ants. Similarly, immortals in the upper 3 grades could definitely crush those in the middle 3 grades like ants. From this, it could be seen that even the Tao of the 5 elements was a supreme cultivation method that could only exist under the sages in the great Tianyuan world. If such a cultivation method were to be thrown out, it would definitely cause a bloodbath. It could even cause the deaths of hundreds of millions of cultivators. It was obvious that the Tao of the 5 elements had been thrown out by the Tao Master of the 5 elements as a pretense to fool the living beings who did not know the cultivation method he had left behind to pass on the gist of trueness. From this, it could be seen how mysterious the even more precious Tao of the Beyond Heaven was. The old man did not wait for Luo Fan to think too much. He immediately began to talk incessantly and eloquently. The void was formed by the old man's thoughts. Everything changed according to the old man's thoughts. The stars rotated, the void changed, and all living things were born and destroyed. Everything was under the old man's control. As a result, as the old man continued to speak, the entire void began to change crazily. Countless wondrous sceneries continuously appeared around Luo Fan and the old man, and then continuously disappeared. It was as if hundreds of millions of worlds were being born and destroyed around them. The language the old man used was an extremely ancient one. This language was very different from the language of the great Tianyuan world. It looked even more ancient and complicated. At the same time, it was more mysterious. The old man had existed here for hundreds of trillions of years. This meant that the Tao Master of the Five Elements had existed for hundreds of trillions of years. For the great Tianyuan world, hundreds of trillions of years were just a moment. However, for all living things in the great Tianyuan world, this period of time was long enough. In such a long period of time, the entire great Tianyuan world would naturally undergo many changes. It was only natural for languages to change. In Luo Fan's previous life, Huaxia had only developed from knots to modern civilization in just a few thousand years. One could imagine how powerful the changes that the light of hundreds of trillions of years had on the evolution of civilization were. Even if there were hundreds of saints in the great Tianyuan world, it was impossible for everything to remain the same. At Luo Fan's level, differences in languages could no longer be a barrier to communication. Therefore, even though this was the first time he had heard of these words, he could easily understand the true meaning behind them. He could also easily understand the true meaning within, and could even hear the various thoughts and emotions of Tao Master Five Element when he created these techniques and wrote these words. This ability naturally allowed him to have an unimaginable understanding of the words spoken by the old man. It was even to the extent that after the elder finished speaking, he already understood the profundities of the technique and completely comprehended all of the mysteries within it. The content of the old man's speech was not the outer sky technique of the five elements, but the inner sky technique. In fact, the inner sky technique could be said to be the foundation of the five elements Tao. Although the outer sky technique was mysterious and unpredictable, it was rooted in the inner sky technique. If one could not completely understand the inner sky technique, the outer sky technique would be like water without a source, a tree without roots. It would be impossible to cultivate it. The Tao of the five elements did not just contain a single cultivation method. Even the inner sky technique was formed by the combination of countless techniques. It was not just some kind of power manipulation technique, state of mind, or technique. Therefore, to explain the inner sky technique clearly was not something that could be done in a few words. The old man's speech took a full 3 years before he managed to explain the inner sky technique to Luo Fan. During these 3 years, Luo Fan spent every moment comprehending the countless techniques and mysteries of the five elements. In the Tao Master of the Five Elements view of the world, the origin of the world was the five elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Everything else was born from the combination of the five elements. Even yin, yang, and chaos were formed by the combination of the five elements in a specific way. As long as one understood the mysteries of the five elements, one could split the sky and earth, create all things, and be omnipotent. On the surface, this view of the world seemed simple and crude, to the point of rudeness. But the internal changes were unimaginably complicated. How did the five elements construct the great heaven primordial world? How did the five elements construct yin and yang? How did they construct all living things? How did they construct space? How did they construct time? All of these were described in great detail. It could be said that according to the inner sky technique, almost everything in the great Tianyuan world could be described clearly. Moreover, there was no contradiction between them. Even Luo Fan felt that the world might really be formed by the circulation of the five elements. However, Luo Fan had, after all, dominated the earth, the untainted land, and the great Tianyuan world, the three supreme places that had gathered countless times. He had a deep-rooted understanding of the world, chaos, and space-time. Even if the Tao of the Five Elements and the Inner Sky technique could explain almost everything, it could not change his deep-rooted understanding. It could not change his view of chaos, his perception of the world and space-time. The Inner Sky technique is so perfect. No wonder it could create a near-perfect world in the great Tianyuan world that surpassed the vast thousand world. However, there must be some limitations and some key weaknesses. Otherwise, there would not be the Outer Sky technique, and it would not be able to create a near-perfect world. Luo Fan's mind was very clear. Even though the Inner Sky technique was like a gem, and almost every word and tone contained infinite truths, he was not truly lost in it. Instead, he calmly weighed the techniques and evaluated the Inner Sky technique. Chapter 795. After the old man spent 3 years explaining the Tao of the Five Elements and the laws of the heavens, he did not stop. Instead, he continued to explain the laws of the heavens. First published, the outer world method was based on the inner world method. One must have a deep understanding of the inner world method in order to understand it a little bit. Only then could one truly understand the mysteries of the method and understand its true meaning. The art of the heavens was to use countless techniques to explain everything in the world using the five elements and make it real. However, the art of beyond the heavens was different. Even though it was still the way of the five elements, it had transcended the ordinary five element. Instead, it expanded the five elements to include everything that contained the gold element, wood element, water element, fire element, and earth element. This change in concept instantly increased the scope of the five elements by countless times. For example, time was an existence that could only be transformed into the five elements after millions and millions of times of decomposition. In this expanded concept, because 100 years could not be cut off and possessed the characteristics of an almost irresistible flow, it was treated as an existence of water and was divided into water. Like time, other beings were classified in a similar way. With such an expansion, the other heaven method could divide all the tangible and intangible existences in the world into the five elements without any step. As a result, the adaptability of the five elements skyrocketed by who knew how many times. After understanding the basic concept of extraterrestrial methods, Luo Fan's eyes lit up like two suns. There was only an indescribable shock in his heart. If it could be said that the art of heaven regarded everything in the world as a combination of the five elements, it was a crude view of the world. But after the five elements were expanded into the five elements, this view of the world became incomparably grand, rising to a level that Luo Fan could not imagine. In this view of the world, the appearance of everything had turned into illusions and remained. There was only the truth hidden under the various appearances. Such a worldview was something that Luo Fan could not achieve. It was also something that he had never thought of before. Even if he had the ability to see through the surface of all things and see through the truth of all things, the world that he saw in his eyes was at most more things that ordinary cultivators could not see. Although he could see through many illusions, they were still hidden by the layers of appearances. The truth of the world was still hidden in the layers of fog. If he wanted to see through this fog, he would still need to expend an endless amount of energy and use all kinds of divine abilities to illuminate it. Once the old man entered the process of explaining the extraterrestrial method, he would be completely focused, completely ignoring all the changes in the outside world. He didn't even pay attention to Luo Fan's various reactions. The words that came out of his mouth were just ordinary ancient characters, even though they were complex and profound. However, it was still something that all cultivators could easily understand. However, when these words were gathered together and formed sentences, all sorts of inconceivable changes occurred. Every word became profound and unfathomable. Every word seemed to contain the deepest secrets of the universe, secrets that should not be expressed in words. As he spoke, the space and time around Luo Fan and the old man completely collapsed, turning into a strange existence that could cover all light and images. Time, space, matter, and energy seemed to exist in this strange existence, yet they also seemed to not exist. The surroundings seemed to have become boundless, yet it also seemed like there was no gap that could accommodate any matter or energy that surpassed the two of them. Everything seemed to have returned to a state of chaos. The state of chaos kept surging and changing, as if it was brewing something. Countless incredible changes could be seen with the naked eye. However, no matter how much it changed, no matter how the state of chaos surged, it was still just a state of chaos. It was still a state of time, space, matter, and energy mixed together. The method of the extraterrestrial method was more than 10,000 times more complicated than the method of the heavens. However, they were all descriptions of concepts, ideas, and worldviews. The actual cultivation method was countless times fewer than the method of the heavens. There were only a few dozen of them. Under such circumstances, the old man only talked about the method of the extraterrestrial method, which was more than 10,000 times more complicated than the method of the heavens, for nearly a year. It was even less than 2/3 of the 3 years that the method of the heavens had taken. After a year, the old man explained the various aspects of the method of the extraterrestrial method, and the state of chaos around Luo Fan, and the old man began to gradually calm down. A boundless starry sky appeared around them. The two of them sat on the praying mats like two gods of creation sitting in the starry sky of the universe. They naturally exuded a desolate and majestic aura. After the old man stopped speaking, he looked extremely tired, and his face was also slightly pale. It seemed that this kind of narration was also a great burden to him. After listening to the old man's narration, Luo Fan had already closed his eyes. The light of wisdom in his mind flickered wildly as he continuously comprehended the two methods of the Tao of the 5 elements, the Tao of the heavens, the Tao of the 5 elements. The Tao of the 5 elements was a direct path to becoming a sage. This Tao was so complicated that it was the first time that Luo Fan had seen it in the countless years he had cultivated. There were numerous techniques involved, and almost every single one of them could be said to be a technique that many cultivators in the world dreamed of obtaining. Every single one of them was enough for an ordinary cultivator to spend their entire life's effort on. More importantly, although these techniques were numerous, every single one of them was extremely important. Every single one of them was an indispensable part of the Tao of the 5 elements. If any of them were missing, it would cause the Tao to be incomplete. In the end, the cultivator who cultivated this Tao would lose the possibility of becoming a saint through this Tao. Between any two techniques, there would be some kind of extremely subtle, complementary relationship. This was especially true for the method of the heavens. The number of methods involved in the method of the heavens was tens of thousands of times more than the method of the heavens, and there was no division of priority. In other words, if one cultivated the method of the heavens, they could start with any method. After that, with every additional cultivation method that was cultivated, the power of the previous cultivation method would increase tremendously. When all the cultivation methods that were related to the art of heaven were cultivated, the art of heaven would be cultivated completely, and one would obtain supreme divine might, reaching the supreme realm that surpassed the 9th level of the immortal realm. Although each method of the heavens was closely related to the method of the heavens, it was above the method of the heavens. However, it was above the many cultivation methods that surpassed the methods within the heavens. It used the many cultivation methods in the world as a foundation. It stepped on the many cultivation methods in the world and rose to an unimaginable height. The reason why the loss of any method of the heavens would cause unpredictable consequences was because the loss of any method would cause the foundation of the method of the heavens to be lost. Obviously, Without a stable foundation, how could one seek Tao? How could one become a sage? The numerous methods of the heavens kept flowing in Luo Fan's mind. They were scattered by the infinite light of wisdom in his mind, and the gist of truth was extracted bit by bit. This process was obviously not an easy one. The Tao Master of 5 elements was the last realm of the 5 realms beyond the 9th rank of the celestial realm. He had even stepped into the inner part of the road to becoming a sage, and was very likely to be breaking through to the sage realm. The inheritance left by such an existence must have been polished for countless years. After countless refinements, he must have clearly described the quintessence of the 5 elements way. If he wanted to take out the quintessence of the 5 elements way in words that were clearly described by the existence of the Tao Master realm, the difficulty could be imagined. In the process of Luo Fan constantly extracting the gist of truth of 5 elements, 100 years passed in a flash. During these 100 years, his body had always been sitting cross-legged on the rank 7 magic treasure without moving at all, as if it was a body that had lost all vitality. And that was an illusory door. It had always been in front of him, motionless, as if it had been there since ancient times. And that bit of will of his, it was in that door, sitting in front of the projection of the Tao Master of 5 elements, eyes closed, motionless like a dead thing. As for Tao Master 5 elements, he was also sitting cross-legged in front of Luo Fan's mind. However, his eyes were not closed. Instead, they seemed to be able to see through time and space, penetrating the void and illuminating an unknown place. He looked a little confused. For him, who had existed for billions of years, what was the difference between 100 years and the blink of an eye? Besides, he had been alone for such a long time, so he naturally had his own way of killing time. Naturally, he would not change because of waiting for 100 years. With this, Luo Fan's mind moved. Suddenly, he slowly opened his eyes and said, "It seems that the true inheritor of the Tao Master has appeared. I have to leave now." The light in the elder's eyes condensed and he smiled. "I didn't expect that no living being would come here for billions of years. Now, in a mere 100 years, living beings have come to meet the Tao Master. How delightful! Latecomer, you have now received all of the Tao Master's inheritance. It is a pity that you are unwilling to accept the inheritance and become his disciple. Many of the treasures left by the Tao Master are not suitable for you. It is useless for you to stay here. Go." Luo Fan bowed and said, "Thank you for the Tao Master's teachings. If I have the time to step on the path of sainthood, I will try my best to find the Tao Master's body." Go. The elder smiled. With that, he waved his hand and the surrounding time and space changed. He gradually disappeared in front of Luo Fan. However, Luo Fan's will was slightly shaken, and in a trance, time and space changed. He had already left that time and space, and once again arrived in front of his body. The illusory door that had appeared in front of him for 100 years had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never been there. Luo Fan's corporeal body slowly opened its eyes and faintly smiled. With a thought, that bit of consciousness returned to his body and completely merged with his mind. Although it seemed that his consciousness had been completely separated from his body in the past 100 years, as if he had experienced something completely different, in reality, everything that his consciousness had experienced was directly transmitted to his body without any delay. The comprehension of his consciousness over the past 100 years was equivalent to his comprehension of his body. There was not much difference between them. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no need for any memory transfer when his consciousness returned to his body. It was natural and calm, as if he was retrieving an ordinary consciousness. After Luo Fan retracted his thoughts, the void not far away slightly distorted, and a little illusory shadow slowly materialized. Looking at the figure, it was one of the rulers of the 9 major forces. Obviously, in the past 100 years, One of the Bloodwood King and the others had finally passed the numerous tests and arrived at the body of the magic treasure to accept the inheritance. However, this person was not the strongest among the 9 rulers, the Bloodwood monarch. Instead, she was a very ordinary female stage 6 immortal realm cultivator who did not seem to be anything special. Luo Fan did not want to face this woman, and his heart moved. His figure naturally disappeared just as the woman was about to completely appear. He didn't want to face the woman, not because he was afraid of the Bloodwood King and the others, but because he felt that he had already obtained the benefits he wanted. If he faced them, it would only cause more trouble. He wouldn't be able to obtain more benefits, nor would he be able to obtain much pleasure from victory. Naturally, he did not want to cause trouble for himself. After a while, the void shook again and another illusory door appeared in front of the woman. This door was very familiar to Luo Fan. It was the door that had appeared in front of him for 100 years. It was the entrance to the illusory world created by the projection of Tao Master 5 Element. Luo Fan could not help smiling when he saw this. He knew that he had entered the official process of inheritance. He did not want to stay here any longer. With a thought, he was about to leave. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in his ear. There are more than 10 Tao Masters' inheritance treasures in the chaotic Tao realm here. They are the inheritances left by the Tao Masters who went to the path of sainthood with me. Since you are interested in finding your own Tao, you can go and find them. They will be of great help to you. Thank you for waking up, Tao Master. Hearing this, Luo Fan knew that this was the projection of Tao Master 5 Elements giving him guidance. His eyes lit up and he bowed to the light door. Then, he did not hesitate. With a thought, he took a step forward and directly crossed thousands of miles. He appeared outside the colorful light layer around the magic treasure. 100 years ago, he had needed to use the spiritual guide to create a passage to pass through the colorful light layer. However, after 100 years of understanding the Tao of the 5 Elements, although he did not directly cultivate it, he had a preliminary understanding of the Tao of the 5 Elements through understanding. The colorful light was formed from the 5 elements and happened to be within the scope of his understanding. As a result, he had gained a deeper understanding of the characteristics of the 5-colored light over the past 100 years. As such, he was able to move through the void without touching the 5-colored light and appear outside the range of the magic treasure. With this kind of performance, it meant that his understanding of the Tao of the 5 elements had increased several times compared to 100 years ago. Maybe I should stay in the chaotic Tao realm for a long time, Luo Fan thought as he looked at the colorful planet in front of him. Although 100 years of understanding had deepened his understanding of the Tao of the 5 elements by several times, the process of extracting the true meaning of the countless methods in the world was very slow. Although it could not be said that he had gained nothing, he could not achieve the goal he wanted to achieve. This speed of comprehension made him realize that if he wanted to extract the profundities that he needed and could help him create the method, it would take a long time before he could do so. It was because of this understanding that he decided to stay in the chaotic Tao realm. In any case, any place in the great Tianyuan world made no difference to him. Although the immemorial Tao realm was only a Tao realm in a relatively dull eternal forest in the great Tianyuan world, since the environment was suitable for his cultivation, he would not have any psychological barriers because of it. As for Ba Yuan, Feng Ling, and the others, who were in the world in the sleeve, he had long forgotten about them. Ba Yuan was just his slave, while Feng Ling and the others were his magic treasures. He was obviously not the kind of person who would make a stupid decision to leave a place that was beneficial to his cultivation for the sake of his slaves and magic treasures. Therefore, while he was thinking about whether to stay or leave, he did not think about the situation of Ba Yuan and the others lying in his world in the sleeve at all. After making his decision, he released his perception and scanned in all directions, carefully sensing his surroundings. Soon, he found a place that was suitable for his cultivation. His body moved, turning into an invisible escape light and flying in the direction he had chosen. During this process, he did not forget to hide his body. It must be known that Bloodwood King and the others had not given up on finding trouble with him. If they found out where he was, although his life would not be in danger, his cultivation process might be interrupted. This was not what he wanted. Anyway, it was not difficult to hide his body, and he did not mind that this seemingly timid action was a little embarrassing, so he naturally did it. Of course, at this moment, Bloodwood King and the others were working hard to find clues to the inheritance and accept the test of the inheritance. Although it had been more than 100 years since they entered the colorful brilliance to accept the test, the complexity and difficulty of the inheritance test made it so that they still could not see any signs of success. They could only work hard to find clues to complete the test and put all their efforts into the test of Tao Master 5 Element. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no one among them who would pay attention to what was happening outside the colorful brilliance. Luo Fan's cautiousness, on the other hand, was just a show for the blind to see. Chapter 796. Luo Fan flew at an extremely fast speed. In just a few breaths, he had flown hundreds of thousands of miles and arrived at a place that was rather special in the realm of immemorial Tao. Text first, although this place was still a gray and hazy void, there was a faint sign of the void sinking in. This kind of sinking made this place seem like a perceptual trap, making it difficult for all living beings to sense what was happening inside. Even Luo Fan had only discovered the existence of such a mysterious place through his perception of his surroundings. Although this place blocked out perception, it could not block out power. Luo Fan covered the place with his power and instantly scanned the inside and outside of that place. Just as he had guessed, there was nothing inside this place. It was just that the void had sunk in, but there was no trace of other matter, and there was no power playing any role in it. After figuring this out, he naturally did not hesitate and stepped into the place. He raised his hand and pointed. From his heaven and earth sleeve, he took out a simple ritual implement that he had bought from the 10,000 weapon pavilion. This magic tool didn't seem to have been refined using a restriction tool refinement method, but its power was only equivalent to a magic tool refined using a restriction tool refinement method with a dozen or so restrictions. But it was not very precious. Its power was also only average. However, its average power was quite useful at this moment. This was because its power was to open up a manor inside that could accommodate hundreds of people. With a ritual implement, it was convenient to live in, and this was what Luo Fan needed the most at this time. The ritual implement looked like a small pavilion. It was only the size of a human head, and it floated in the air. It was extremely inconspicuous in the entire realm of immemorial Tao. It was extremely difficult to find such a ritual implement in the vast realm of immemorial Tao. However, Luo Fan did not give up on hiding this ritual implement just because it was so small and difficult to find. With a thought, he sent countless lines into this ritual implement. In an instant, the ritual implement shone and its power increased greatly. This kind of increase was not because of the increase in the number of rooms inside, but because the concealment ability of this artifact could only increase by 1,000 times. In an instant, it completely blended into the void. Unless there was someone more powerful than Luo Fan who had the heart to look for him. Otherwise, it would be extremely difficult to detect its existence. After doing all that, Luo Fan stepped into the magic treasure and directly chose a room to sit in. He closed his eyes and began to continue the process of the past 100 years, sorting out and comprehending the true meaning of the 5 elemental Daos and the countless techniques within the heavens. Sorting out the true meaning of the 5 elemental Daos was naturally much easier than creating such a cultivation method in the past. Even if this technique was perfect and almost impossible to change, it was not impossible to extract its true meaning under the condition that it was not complete. Therefore, although Luo Fan's sorting and retrieving process was slow, it was still progressing. Every bit of progress allowed him to have a deeper understanding of the way of the 5 elements and the mysteries of the great way of Tianyuan. It allowed him to further improve his understanding of his own cultivation method. In a trance, he felt that the cultivation method that was brewing in his mind was moving in a more and more complete direction. However, this kind of progress was not without its drawbacks. After all, the way of the 5 elements was broad and profound. It had almost formed a perfect worldview, and could almost perfectly explain everything in the great way of Tianyuan. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for Luo Fan to not be affected at all. The direction he was moving in was unknowingly getting closer to the way of the 5 elements. This kind of change was naturally not what Luo Fan wanted to see. Therefore, although he was constantly brewing his own cultivation method, he did not immediately start creating it. Instead, he compared it with the endless memories he brought from his body and continuously removed the one-sided influence of the way of the 5 elements. He worked hard to make it pure and refined. This process was not easy, and the time it took was not short. In this trance of taking, removing, refining, and purifying, time passed by leisurely. In a trance, 2,000 years had passed. After 2,000 years, Luo Fan, who was in the magic tool, opened his eyes, which had been closed for 2,000 years. There was a faint, pure brilliance flashing in his eyes. Although I have gained something, I can only upgrade myself to the 2nd level. Although I have surpassed the disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, it is still not the disbanded way of the great all-embracing heaven. What a pity! Luo Fan sensed his own body, and could not help but sigh slightly. At this moment, his cultivation method had not been created. It was only because he had taken the true meaning of the way of the sky and integrated the mysteries contained in it into his own spirit that he had naturally comprehended many of the mysteries of the great way of Tianyuan. And comprehending these mysteries naturally made his body, his strength, and his spirit change. Although it did not make him break through to the next level, it improved his quality. It made his spirit, his strength, and his body more and more compatible with the great way of Tianyuan. This kind of compatibility naturally caused his grade to rise. Before this, he had only cultivated the 2 cultivation methods to change his body and the quality of his life, but he had already pushed his grade to the peak of the middle 3 grades, which was the peak of the 4th grade. Now that his grade rose again, he naturally broke through the upper 3 grades and became a 2nd grade 7th stage immortal. In the great way of Tianyuan, apart from those who had great luck and wisdom, only those who were disciples of saints could achieve this grade. At this moment, Luo Fan did not even have a cultivation method, but he had already achieved this grade. This was enough to show how extraordinary he was. As for the Tao of the 5 elements within the heavens, it had been completely destroyed by him over the past 2,000 years. The boundaries of the countless cultivation methods were completely blurred by him. Every single cultivation method had become fragmented. The countless cultivation methods that were similar, the fragments that described the same true meaning, or the fragments that could be combined into the same type of true meaning, were all fused together. This formed an extremely chaotic mess. Almost any living being who saw it would feel that it had become a complete mess of nonsense. If a cultivator obtained these words to cultivate, let alone cultivating a peerless ability, their soul might die and their consciousness might collapse as soon as they started cultivating. However, it was precisely because of this mess that the perfect system was broken. The true meaning was no longer inseparable from the cultivation method, and the truth was no longer hidden in the profound methods. This allowed Luo Fan to better organize and obtain the true meaning contained within the way of the heaven. It's a pity that the way of the heaven is too profound. It's too perfect. Even with my current knowledge, it's difficult for me to scatter it. Even the slightest bit of comprehension will affect me, making it difficult for me to control myself. Now is not the time to comprehend its profundities. Luo Fan sighed softly and stood up. His current body was flawless. No matter how long he sat, even if it was for billions of years, his body would not feel the slightest bit of obstruction. When he stood up, there would naturally not be any sound of bones stretching. As such, it was as if he had just sat down. However, it was as if he had just sat down, unlike an existence that had been sitting cross-legged for 2,000 years. After standing up, he took a step forward and appeared outside the ritual implement. With a wave of his hand, the ritual implement was put into his heaven and earth in his sleeve. Looking around, his surroundings were no different from 2,000 years ago. It was as if time had completely stopped here, as if the past 2,000 years had not passed at all. Tao Master 5 Elements said that there are many inheritances here. I wonder where they are. Luo Fan looked around and such a thought flashed through his mind. Tao Master 5 Elements' way of the 5 elements had already given him so many benefits. The inheritances of the other Tao Masters would definitely not be too weak. If he could compare the same inheritance with the Tao of the 5 elements, he might be able to organize the way of the heaven and earth of the 5 elements and extract the true meaning. By then, his understanding of the great Tianyuan world would definitely increase by a shocking amount. Perhaps at that time he would be able to easily create his own cultivation method. Under such circumstances, he naturally would not let go of the inheritance of the other Tao Masters. The chaotic essence Tao realm was vast and boundless, but it was only a Tao realm after all. At most, it was a bit more advanced than the boundless world. It was countless times worse than a perfect world like the untainted land, let alone the great Tianyuan world. Therefore, even if there were no clues, with Luo Fan's ability, it wasn't too difficult to find other inheritances. With a slight thought, the power in his body shook and gathered towards his eyes. In an instant, hundreds of millions of formations were constructed in his eyes, densely packed together. If they were spread out, there would not be any gaps in the space of billions of miles. It would be completely filled by the power lines that were like spider silk. With this change, the entire chaotic essence Tao realm instantly changed in Luo Fan's eyes. The originally gray space of nothingness turned transparent in the blink of an eye. The auras that were extremely far away in the Tao realm were instantly pulled in front of him, allowing him to directly see the existence of a different aura in that location. Those inheritances were left in the chaotic essence Tao realm by the Tao Masters. They were passed down the cultivation of the Tao Masters throughout their lives, so that they could nurture cultivators that might be of help to them. Naturally, it was impossible for them to completely lead into the void without the slightest aura leaking out and not be detected by any cultivator. Under such circumstances, any location with an inheritance would definitely have a different aura from other locations. This gave Luo Fan the possibility of discovering the location of these inheritances. Of course, the difference in auras would definitely be extremely subtle and obscure. He would only be able to detect it when he was close. Otherwise, why would it be hidden in the Tao realm? How would it be possible to select the cultivators that were truly suitable for the inheritance? According to the original situation, even with Luo Fan's ability, he would have to be quite close to these places of inheritance in order to be able to sense these places of inheritance. Although this distance might be tens of thousands of times greater than that of ordinary cultivators, he still had to get close after all. However, during the process of sorting out the true meaning of the 5 elements Tao within the heavens over the past 2,000 years, he had combined those true meanings with his own power to create some rather mysterious magic skills that did not involve fundamental cultivation method. At this moment, he was using an aura-gazing technique that he had passed down over the past 2,000 years. This method was naturally different from the crude methods of looking at feng shui in the mortal world. Instead, it was a mysterious method that could ignore distance, strength, and all other factors to directly see the aura that he wanted to see. Of course, although it could ignore distance, there was a certain limit to it. It was limited by one's cultivation level. If he was in the Tao realm, which was a bit stronger than the boundless thousand worlds, he would naturally be able to ignore distance without much effort. However, if this Tao realm grew into a perfect world, it did not need to be too strong. For example, if it grew to the level of the current primordial world, then he would need to spend tens of thousands of years of cultivation to be able to ignore distance. And if he went one step further, for example, in the great Tianyuan world, unless Luo Fan was hundreds of billions of times stronger than he was now, he would probably not be able to see through an entire continent, let alone ignore distance. He carefully comprehended the auras that were distributed throughout the chaotic essence Tao realm. Luo Fan quickly discovered where the magic treasure left behind by Tao Master 5 Elements was. He could even vaguely guess that the magic treasure was undergoing a drastic change at this moment. Either the person receiving the inheritance had reached the final stage, or the projection of Tao Master 5 Elements was displaying some kind of magic. After thinking for a while, Luo Fan let go of this and began to comprehend other auras. Including the inheritance left behind by Tao Master 5 Elements, there were a total of 19 inheritances that existed throughout the chaotic essence Tao realm. There was nothing else in the entire chaotic essence Tao realm except for these 19 inheritances. It was as if the entire chaotic essence Tao realm was specifically built to accommodate these 19 inheritances. Judging from the auras, the 19 inheritances that contain them should all be magic treasures. There were strong and weak magic treasures among these magic treasures, but even the weakest was at the level of a 7th grade magic treasure. The strong ones even emitted an indescribable pressure that enveloped Luo Fan's divine soul as soon as he sensed the aura. Unless it was a 9th grade magic treasure, it was impossible for him to feel such a feeling. As for 9th grade magic treasures, they were not limited by the body. At the very least, they could exert power that surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. Perhaps they could not reach the level of the annihilation realm, but they would definitely have no problem crushing the 9th stage of the immortal realm. The 7th, 8th, and 9th stages of the immortal realm were the upper 3 stages of the immortal realm. In the primordial world, there were the 3 stages of the zenith heaven realm. Existences at this level, even if they were magic treasures that did not have true intelligence in the great Tianyuan world, must be extremely incredible existences. When Luo Fan saw their auras through the Qi gazing technique, those magic treasures seemed to have sensed it. For a moment, the 2 different attitudes were sensed by Luo Fan through the changes in their auras. Among them, nearly 10 magic treasures emitted a sense of rejection, while the remaining 9, including the magic treasure left by Tao Master 5 Elements, emitted a sense of welcome. Obviously, this represented the attitude of these magic treasures towards him and their rejection towards him. This also meant that if he were to go to the inheritances, he might encounter treatment. In an instant, Luo Fan gave up on the idea of going to the places where the magic treasures emitted a sense of rejection. The magic treasures that emitted a sense of rejection did not have a specific level restriction. There were 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade magic treasures. Among them, 7th grade magic treasures were still manageable. He was still confident that he could escape from them, but 8th grade and 9th grade magic treasures were existences that were difficult for him to resist. Unless he could recover the supreme power of his body, if these magic treasures wanted to deal with him, he might not even be able to escape. Moreover, the most important thing was, since these magic treasures emitted an aura that repelled him, it would be difficult for him to gain the approval of these magic treasures if he was unwilling to really worship the masters of these magic treasures. It was even more impossible for them to be like the projection of Tao Master 5 Elements, who would unreservedly pass on the inheritance to him. In this way, going to these magic treasures that rejected him was unlikely to gain any benefits, but he might encounter great danger. How could he choose such a stupid choice? After secretly weighing it, Luo Fan finally made a decision. He chose a 7th-grade magic treasure that did not reject him, and his figure turned into a conveyance light and flew away. Although there were magic treasures of the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade among the magic treasures that welcomed him, it seemed that the better choice was to go to the 9th-grade magic treasure. After all, the inheritance in the 9th-grade magic treasure might be more powerful than the inheritance in the 7th-grade and 8th-grade magic treasures. However, at this time, Luo Fan was only a 2nd-grade 7th-grade immortal. He was not even a Daluo Lu Stao. If the 7th-grade magic treasure wanted to deal with him, he might be able to escape, but if the 8th-grade and 9th-grade magic treasures wanted to harm him, he would be completely helpless. Although these magic treasures were exuding an intention to welcome him at this time, who knew what the truth was? If something went wrong, he might still have a chance to escape if he chose the 7th-grade magic treasure. It was precisely because of this that he chose the 7th-grade magic treasure that seemed to be the weakest. His speed was extremely fast, and the 7th-grade magic treasure was only a few 100 million miles away from him. In a short while, he crossed a considerable distance and came to where the magic treasure was. Unlike the magic treasure left by Tao Master 5 Elements, this magic treasure was in the shape of a mirror. However, it was not an ordinary mirror, but a mirror with a diameter of thousands of miles. The mirror was gray in color, and it was no different from the gray void around it. Furthermore, it was lying flat, and if one were to look at it from afar, it was very likely that they would miss it if they didn't pay attention to it. The back of this mirror was flat, with only strands of simple lines. It seemed to outline something, but it was not completely outlined, looking extremely simple and extremely chaotic. On the front of the mirror, an extremely mysterious and incredible picture was being displayed. It was not anything else but a world, a time and space. To be continued. Chapter 797. On the front of the mirror there was actually a world in the form of a plane. Text first. The world in the mirror seemed to be infinitely vast. There were mountains and rivers, plains and hills and countless living beings. He could even faintly find traces of cultivators living here. Looking at this world, Luo Fan was not too surprised. In the primordial world, a level 7 magic treasure was already at the level of a great overarching heavenly treasure. Its power had reached an indescribable level. Opening a world inside it was a small matter. However, even though he was not surprised by the world in the mirror, he could not help but admire the ingenuity of the person who refined this magic treasure. After all, it was not difficult for the 836th Taoist to open up a world, but the form this world existed in was a test of the creator's ability to create. If this magic treasure had opened up a world inside, Luo Fan would not have been too surprised. However, this world had fused with the surface of the mirror and existed in a two-dimensional way. This was the first time he had seen it, so he naturally felt that it was an eye-opener. Arriving here, the aura of this magic treasure became even more obvious to Luo Fan. The welcoming feeling in the aura also became more intuitive and stronger. Luo Fan carefully sensed the aura of this magic treasure, and he could not help but frown. This was because he could sense traces left behind by other living beings in the aura of this magic treasure. These traces were faintly discernible. If he was not careful, he could ignore them. However, in Luo Fan's senses, these auras were extremely obvious, allowing him to instantly sense the authenticity of these traces. He knew how long these traces had been left behind. These traces were formed by at least tens of thousands of cultivators entering the world on the surface of this magic treasure. And the closest trace to this one is at most less than 1,000,000 years old. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and he had already analyzed a lot of things from the 836th mark of the Tao disciple. The legacy magic treasure left behind by Tao Master 5 Elements hasn't been set foot in for billions of years. Why is this magic treasure like a public toilet? It's almost as if people come in and out. He was puzzled, but he stopped himself from immediately stepping into the magic treasure. It seems that the inheritance here is not so easy to obtain. He had already understood this fact. This conclusion was not difficult to reach. This magic treasure had traces of tens of thousands of cultivators entering and leaving here. Obviously, although there were tens of thousands of living beings who came here to accept the inheritance test, none of them had truly obtained all the inheritance. Collect this magic treasure. How could he not know this fact? Under his vigilance, he released his perception and began to sense this magic treasure in the most detailed way. He began to comprehend the structure and power of this magic treasure. With Luo Fan's current cultivation realm of the second stage, seventh stage, immortal realm, the strength of his perception ability had long reached an unimaginable level. Under this kind of situation, he gradually comprehended some of the mysteries of this magic treasure. This magic treasure was a rank 7 magic treasure. This was naturally not fake. However, this rank 7 magic treasure was not an ordinary rank 7 magic treasure, but one with rank 8 materials. The refining method was enough to make it a rank 7 magic treasure. The reason why it was only a rank 7 magic treasure was because it was sealed by a powerful force and suppressed by a powerful existence. Understanding this, Luo Fan couldn't help but frown. In his heart, he had the thought of leaving this place and heading to another inheritance. However, this thought only flashed by. However, he knew that even the other legacy treasures would not be as simple as this enchanted treasure. If he left because this enchanted treasure hid a power that surpassed what he had sensed before, then he might have to leave all of these legacies. He would not dare to enter any of them. Because of this consideration, the thought of leaving was extinguished by him before it could truly form. Fine. Before the seal is undone, this magic treasure can only unleash the power of rank 7, but it's not fatal. But it's not fatal. Luo Fan sighed. He took a step and came to the front of the mirror, slowly descending. The moment his feet touched the front of the mirror, he suddenly felt an indescribable power pass through his body from the point of contact. In an instant, he felt that time and space had changed, and his body had appeared in another world. He looked around. It was the world he saw in the mirror, and the place he was standing on was the mountain peak he had chosen to land on in the mirror. This mountain was not very tall in the great Tianyuan world, or even the untainted world. It was only a few 100,000 feet high, but in this mirror world it was almost the highest mountain in the entire world. Looking around, it seemed as though the entire world was within his field of vision. There was an endless expanse of land, an endless sky, an endless number of mountains, and an endless amount of vitality. Everything made him feel as though he had arrived in a complete world. He took a deep breath, and the rolling primordial chi gathered from all directions and directly poured into his body. It was instantly converted into his power, making him feel a sense of fullness from the bottom of his heart. It turns out that it has such an auxiliary function for cultivation. It seems that this magic treasure was not refined for battle. Luo Fan's mind flickered with thoughts. The surrounding primordial chi was very rich. Although it had not condensed into liquid mist, it was more than 100 times richer than the primordial chi of heaven and earth in the outside world. Obviously, this magic treasure had the function of condensing the primordial chi of the outside world and returning the primordial chi of heaven and earth to primordial chi. This function was obviously to help with cultivation. Otherwise, it would not have been like this. As this thought flashed through his mind, Luo Fan felt much more relaxed. Although he did not think that this magic treasure could instantly rise to the 8th level and use all its power to crush him, this magic treasure had the potential to reach the 8th level. It was only because it was sealed and suppressed that it remained at the 7th level. That irresistible power hung high above him. Even if it was Luo Fan, he couldn't ignore the feeling of being threatened. Naturally, he would feel a strong pressure. At this moment, knowing that this magic treasure was not a magic treasure for attack, Luo Fan naturally felt a lot more relaxed. He raised his hand and grabbed at the void. Infinite power burst out, acting on the void. In an instant, the void slightly distorted, and the scene in front of him changed slightly. Only after a long while did he regain his composure. It's just similar to the strength of the vast thousand world. After doing this, Luo Fan had already come to a conclusion. He did not use his full strength when he attacked just now. In fact, it was just a casual grab. If the level of this world exceeded that of the vast thousand world, then his grab would not have caused any changes in the void. At most, it would have torn open an area of primordial chi of the surrounding primordial chi. But if the level of this world did not reach the level of the vast thousand world, then this grab would definitely shatter the void, turning the void within a radius of dozens or hundreds of miles into powder. The reason why he used this method to test the level of this world, and not like when he stepped into the immemorial Tao realm before, where he could sense the level of the world with a slight sense, was because this world was completely different from the immemorial Tao realm outside. The structure of time and space in this world was completely different from the outside world, the eternal forest, the great Tianyuan world, and the untainted land. The structure of time and space in this world. It was an extremely strange flat structure. This kind of flat structure caused everything in the world to be flat, as if everything existed on a flat surface. Even this mountain, which was hundreds of thousands of feet high, was in fact a flat existence. Even Luo Fan himself had become a flat existence when he stepped into this world. The reason why it could not be seen with the naked eye, as if everything was no different from the normal world, was because of the perception of the naked eye and the perception of the mind. Everything had been distorted and became equally flat, which was why there seemed to be no difference. This was the first time Luo Fan had seen such a world, so he naturally could not easily measure the level of this world. Because of this, that was why he needed to use such a crude method to measure the level of this world. I didn't expect a Stage 7 Immortal Realm cultivator to enter the world of heritage. It seems that the legacy of the sect has really weakened. At this moment, a leisurely sigh suddenly sounded in Luo Fan's ear. Luo Fan furrowed his brows. This sound came from all directions, as if it was coming from the heavens and earth. Are you the master of this world? I wonder if you can show yourself? After frowning, he relaxed and said with cupped hands. As he spoke, a figure slowly condensed in front of him. This figure had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He wore a strange robe and had a tall crown on his head. He looked extremely graceful and luxurious. Although his expression was dim, there was an indescribable majesty emanating from him. It has been over 300,000 years since a sect's disciple has come to accept the inheritance. Which sect are you from? Which generation are you? The middle-aged man asked Luo Fan. As soon as the man appeared, Luo Fan felt like he had become one with the world. Every breath he took guided the energy cycle of the world, and every movement he made guided the endless laws and laws of the world. It was as if with just a single thought, he would be able to launch a destructive attack on any existence in the world, completely wiping out all existences that entered this place. However, the man's cultivation was only at the 7th stage. He was not even in the upper 3 stages, only at the 4th stage. Luo Fan was not too afraid of a cultivator like this. This world was merely a world created by a 7th stage magic treasure. Even if all the power was gathered, it could only unleash the power of a 7th stage magic treasure. This man was only at the 7th stage of the immortal realm. Even if he was in the middle 3 stages, it was not enough to make him feel fear. With a rank 7 magic treasure and a rank 4 stage 7 immortal realm cultivation realm, it might be difficult for Luo Fan to win against such a combination, but it would not be difficult for him to leave. Naturally, he would not be afraid. Friend, you have misunderstood. I am not a disciple of any sect. It was only a coincidence that I came here, Luo Fan said with cupped hands. The The middle-aged man frowned. He did not expect Luo Fan to answer like that. As his expression changed, a wave of pressure radiated from his body. The surrounding space was slightly distorted under this pressure. Dark clouds began to gather in the sky. It was as if they were brewing an endless attack that was about to descend. Impossible. This land of inheritance is within the core of the Three Mystery Sect. Unless you are a disciple of the Three Mystery Sect, it is impossible for you to enter this place. Which sect are you from? Are you a disciple of the Extermination Dao sect? How dare you not recognize your sect? The middle-aged man's eyes burned with passion. The pressure he radiated increased tenfold as it pressed down on Luo Fan. This pressure was enough to make ordinary 7th-stage immortals feel uncomfortable. However, to Luo Fan, who had the will of a body, it was nothing at all. However, this was nothing. It did not give him any negative feelings at all. However, while he did not feel any negative emotions, it did not mean that he did not care. Even if it did not affect him. However, there was no doubt that the other party wanted to suppress him and make him yield. He did not provoke the other party, yet the other party wanted to suppress him so rudely. No matter how firm Luo Fan's Dao heart was, he would definitely feel something. He felt displeased, but he did not reply. His body shook and a powerful aura radiated from his body, crushing down on the middle-aged man. The expression of the middle-aged man changed. He condensed all the pressure he emitted to block Luo Fan's aura. However, although Luo Fan didn't use his full strength, he still pushed his aura to the level where it could crush the middle-aged man. Therefore, the pressure released by the middle-aged man was instantly shattered by Luo Fan's aura. It didn't have the slightest ability to stop the aura as it scattered in all directions, allowing the aura to continue to crush him without any hindrance. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He did something, but his body suddenly became illusory. It was as if he had teleported. It was as if he was hiding in another space and time. Luo Fan's imposing aura suddenly fell, but it didn't fall on anything. It was as if the place where the middle-aged man stood was empty, without any physical existence. Luo Fan's control over his own imposing manner had already reached the acme of perfection. Although his aura had landed on nothing, it would not cause him any harm like an ordinary living being who used their power wrongly. He only revealed a faint smile on his face and withdrew his aura. Then, he withdrew his aura back into his body and stood there quietly, as if nothing had happened. When the middle-aged man saw this, his face alternated between green and white. It took a long time for him to return to normal. The changes in the space and the dark clouds in the sky also returned to normal. The space returned to normal, and the dark clouds disappeared. It was as if nothing had happened. The middle-aged man reappeared and bowed to Luo Fan. I was worried about the sect just now, so I overreacted. I have been rude. I understand that you are worried about the sect, so I will not take it to heart. I am Luo Fan. How should I address you? Luo Fan returned the greeting. I am the elder of the Three Mystery Sect, Chuan Daozi, the middle-aged man said. At this moment, his mental state had returned to normal. Every move he made was graceful and noble, giving off an intimidating charm that would make anyone have a good impression of him. After the two of them exchanged greetings, they did not immediately ask each other what they were concerned about. Instead, Chuan Daozi invited Luo Fan to his cave dwelling as a guest. Luo Fan was naturally overjoyed and agreed. Chuan Daozi had a very special status in this inheritance treasure. If he wanted to obtain the inheritance, he would have to go through Chuan Daozi, so he naturally had many things to ask him. Chuan Daozi had clearly been in this treasure for countless years, so he did not know what was happening in the outside world. Naturally, he had many things to ask Luo Fan. In a situation like this where they had many questions to ask each other, they naturally needed a place to communicate. It was impossible for them to communicate directly on the mountain peak against the cold wind. Although the changes in the surrounding environment were nothing to them since they were both in the seventh stage immortal realm, it was impossible for them to do so. However, talking in a bad environment was naturally not as good as talking in a good environment. Chuan Daozi's cave dwelling was hidden in the depths of the Sea of Clouds. According to the structure of this world, it was located in the depths of the treasure, in a place that could not be seen from the mirror. The two of them flew up together. Along the way, Chuan Daozi introduced the various things of this world to Luo Fan. The structure of this world was actually quite similar to the Great Heaven Origin world, but it was countless times smaller. There were hundreds of continents in this world. The dozens of continents in the center were named the inner domain, while the hundreds of continents outside were named the outer domain. The nature of this world was exactly the same as the Great Heaven Origin world's inner domain and outer domain. This world was at the level of a major thousand world. Just like the Great Chaos world, it could also give birth to fourth, sixth-stage cultivators. However, because this was only a world inside the treasure, the resources were limited. As a result, over the countless years, only a few dozen sixth-stage cultivators had existed. The status of sixth-stage cultivators in this world was similar to that of sages in the Great Heaven Origin world. They were high above and controlled everything. As a result, each of the dozens of continents was controlled and suppressed by a sixth-stage immortal. It was also because of their suppression that the inner domain was more peaceful. As for the outer domain, it was similar to the Great Heaven Origin world and the Eternal Forest. There were no sixth-stage immortals, but every cultivator was working hard to reach the sixth stage. As a result, it was extremely chaotic. It was also a cruel world where the strong preyed on the weak. As he listened to Chuan Daozi's explanation, Luo Fan's understanding of this world became deeper and deeper. He gradually felt an indescribable feeling. To be continued. Chapter 798. This world seemed to have a similar function to the Eternal Forest. It could simulate the state of the Great Heaven Primordial world, and it also seemed to have the function of using this method to comprehend the feeling of a saint. Book Reading Network. As soon as this feeling appeared, Luo Fan had a hunch that the current state of the world within the magic treasure might have been arranged by Chuan Daozi. There was no evidence to prove this hunch, but Luo Fan could believe it. He knew that there was a high possibility that this was the truth. However, this did not mean anything to him. Thus, he did not say it out loud. He just nodded with a smile and followed Chuan Daozi up the Sea of Clouds. During this process, Luo Fan could faintly feel that the surrounding spacetime was constantly changing. The surrounding laws were also undergoing subtle changes. The 8373 mysterious way transformation. This change could not be described with words, but it gradually separated the surrounding spacetime from the surroundings. The two of them were advancing extremely quickly. However, it took them 2 hours to travel from where Luo Fan was to where Chuan Daozi's cave abode was. This period of time didn't seem like much, but under normal circumstances, it was more than enough for 2 seventh-stage immortals to travel a distance of 1 billion kilometers. This showed how difficult it was to get to Chuan Daozi's cave abode from that location. Of course, Luo Fan did not have any doubts about this. After all, there were dozens of sixth-stage immortals controlling the world. If it was so easy to reach Chuan Daozi's cave abode, wouldn't it be easily discovered by sixth-stage immortals? How could they hide behind the scenes and control this part of the world? When the surrounding spacetime stabilized, Luo Fan suddenly felt like he had reappeared in the chaotic Tao realm. Apart from the natural yuan qi that filled the surroundings, all the laws were not much different from the outside world. It was so much so that the surroundings were gray and hazy. Only a single mountain could be seen in this space. It was the 8373rd profound Tao. The mountain shone brightly and naturally emitted an aura that could suppress everything. Any living being that saw this mountain would instantly know how mysterious it was. On top of the mountain, there were countless densely packed buildings. These buildings were of all shapes and sizes. Some were tall, some were short, some were wide, and some were narrow. They naturally emitted waves of Taoist rhymes, and there was a kind of endless mysterious charm within them. When Luo Fan saw this mountain peak, he immediately understood that the many buildings on this mountain peak likely stored the many ancient books passed down by the three mysterious paths. For a moment, a look of anticipation appeared on his face. The Chuan Dao disciple was paying attention to Luo Fan. When he saw the change in Luo Fan's expression, he couldn't help but laugh. He smiled and said, "This mountain is my cave abode, and it's also the place where my three mysterious paths' inheritance is stored. I've made a fool of myself in front of fellow Taoists." Luo Fan shook his head and praised, "Just from this aura, I can tell that the three mysterious sect is definitely an extremely powerful sect." As they spoke, they arrived at a manor at the foot of the mountain. The manor wasn't big, but it was enough to accommodate hundreds of people. The interior wasn't luxurious. However, it was filled with natural interest, as if it had fused with nature. "Thank you for your praise, fellow Taoist." The Chuan Dao disciple thanked Luo Fan for praising the strength of the three mysterious paths and led Luo Fan into the manor. The innate yuan qi within the manor was more than 100 times denser than the outside world. It had already condensed into a faint mist that circulated throughout the manor. "Fellow Taoist, why didn't you find some servants to serve you?" Luo Fan was surprised when he saw that the interior of the manor was extremely empty. I don't like having too many people. Since I don't have any needs, I didn't find anyone to come here. Fellow Taoist, please excuse me." The Chuan Dao disciple smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist is noble, I can't compare to you." Luo Fan praised. After sitting down in a guest building in the manor, the Chuan Dao disciple got to the point and said, "Fellow Taoist is the first expert to come here in 300,000 years. I wonder if you can explain the situation outside. How can fellow Taoist enter this place without being a disciple of the three mysterious paths?" Luo Fan was already prepared. He knew that the Chuan Dao disciple would definitely ask this question. Thus, he wasn't surprised and directly told him about the primordial ruins, specifically explaining the situation outside the primordial Dao realm. As for the truth, Luo Fan didn't hide anything. After all, it wasn't much, and it didn't involve many of his secrets. The Chuan Dao disciple listened to Luo Fan's words. He was stunned for a moment as if he had been struck by lightning. His face was filled with disbelief. How is this possible? Why would the inherited Dao realm leave the sect and appear in this so-called ruins? Could it be that the three mysterious path has already been destroyed? No. Impossible. The three mysterious path has at least 10 Dao masters, 100 transcendent masters, and 1,000 Dao integration masters. Apart from the sages, there are no more than 100 sects in the world that can resist them. It's impossible for them to be destroyed in just 300,000 years. The Chuan Dao disciple murmured. In the end, he opened his eyes wide and shouted angrily. 300,000 years ago, there were disciples of the three mysterious paths who came to the land of inheritance to accept the inheritance. At that time, they heard from the disciples that the three mysterious path was still prosperous and was still a first-class force in the world. This naturally meant that if the three mysterious path had been destroyed, it must have been in the past 300,000 years. That was why the Chuan Dao disciple made such a judgment. When Luo Fan heard the Chuan Dao disciple's words, he couldn't help but be secretly shocked. The three mysterious path had 10 Dao masters, 100 transcendent masters, and 1,000 Dao integration masters. The strength of the three mysterious path was simply beyond the limits of his imagination. At this moment, he already understood that in the cultivation system of the Tianyuan Great World, there were 5 realms beyond the 9 stages of the immortal realm before becoming a sage. They were Annihilation Realm, Void Enlightenment Realm, Tao Integration Realm, Transcendent Realm, and Tao Master. Although he had never heard of the honorifics of each realm, he knew from the names that the Chuan Tao disciple had mentioned that the Tao Master must be a cultivator who had reached the Tao Master realm, and the Transcendent Realm must be a cultivator who had reached the Transcendent Realm. Similarly, Tao Integration Masters could not be cultivators of other realms besides the Tao Integration Realm. Based on his conjecture about these 5 realms, even if he cultivated his body to the peak of the Zenith Heaven Golden Path, he would at most be equivalent to a Tao Integration Master at the Tao Integration Realm. This was the result he boldly inferred from the fact that when he was at the peak of the Zenith Heaven Golden Path, he was equivalent to a cultivator who had surpassed the 9 stages of the immortal realm. If he made a conservative deduction, he might even be equivalent to a void enlightenment realm cultivator. Under such circumstances, the 3 mysterious path had 1,000 Tao Integration Masters, 100 Transcendent Realm cultivators, and 10 Tao Masters. This was the strength of the 3 mysterious path. It was easy to imagine. Luo Fan boldly deduced that even if the number of void enlightenment realm cultivators did not reach 10,000, it would not be too far off. As for the number of invaders, it would probably reach about 100,000. There would definitely be more stage 9 immortal realm cultivators. From the looks of it, there were at least 10 million existences in the 3 mysterious path that could surpass Luo Fan's clone. Even if it was stronger than the body in the primordial world, there were at least 100,000 cultivators. How could Luo Fan not be shocked by the strength of the 3 mysterious path? From what Taoist Chuan had said, he knew that there were at least 100 sects in this world that could compare to the 3 mysterious path. There were at least 100 of them. This meant that in the Tianyuan Great World, other than the saints, there were at least 100 million people who could surpass Luo Fan's body in the primordial world. If the 800 saints who were even more powerful were added, the number of living beings that were stronger than Luo Fan's body would probably reach billions. There were already so many people who were stronger than his body, and they were even stronger than the clone that was here. That number was more than 1,000 times greater. If that was the case, with the current strength of Luo Fan's clone, it might be an exaggeration to say that it was at the level of an ant. However, he definitely could not be considered an expert. After understanding this, Luo Fan instantly became extremely vigilant. His desire to increase his strength was more than 10,000 times stronger than before. Luo Fan had made up his mind. However, the Taoist Chuan seemed to have suffered an unimaginable blow, and his expression was extremely panicked. He muttered words of disbelief and unimaginable. After a long time, he finally recovered from the unbearable blow. Although there was still a bit of panic on his face, he managed to maintain his composure. "Thank you for telling me about the situation of the 3 mysterious path. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I would have been kept in the dark for many years before I could understand." The Taoist Chuan sighed. "The 3 mysterious path is so powerful. I don't think it will be destroyed. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry too much." Luo Fan could only say this. The Taoist Chuan shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, you might not know the significance of this inheritance ground to the 3 mysterious path. The inherited Tao realm definitely wouldn't leave the 3 mysterious sects mountain. Since the inherited Tao realm had somehow come to the primordial ruins, something must have happened to the 3 mysterious sects. Even their inheritance might have been severed. I should have thought of this long ago. With the power of the 3 mysterious path, no matter how few geniuses there will only be geniuses coming here every few thousand years to accept the inheritance. Now that no disciple has come to accept the inheritance for 300,000 years, something must have happened. I just didn't want to believe it." When Luo Fan heard the Taoist Chuan's words, he didn't know what to say. The Taoist Chuan was only talking to Luo Fan. He didn't intend to listen to any construction ideas from Luo Fan's mouth. Therefore, he kept on talking. My three mysterious path was created by three Tao sovereigns 37 trillion years ago. Back then, the three patriarchs discovered this Tao inheritance realm by chance and obtained the inheritance of the three Tao sovereigns from tens of trillions of years ago. As a result, they jointly created the three mysterious path. This primordial Tao realm is also regarded as the sect's Tao inheritance realm. Once there are talented disciples in the sect, they will be allowed to come to the Tao inheritance realm to try their luck in order to continue the inheritance that might be interrupted. The Taoist Chuan told Luo Fan about the long history of the three mysterious path. As Luo Fan listened to this history, most of the doubts in his heart were finally solved. The three mysterious path was developed from the inheritance left behind by the three Tao sovereigns who had gone to the Saint realm with the five-element Tao sovereigns. No wonder this Tao realm was regarded as the sect's inheritance ground. Understanding this, he felt a strong sense of admiration for the three Tao sovereigns who had created the three mysterious path. Once other cultivators received the inheritance, they would at most take away all the treasures. However, the three of them were astonishingly bold. Instead of moving the inheritance magic treasures, they directly took the entire Tao realm as their own. Not only did they occupy the inheritance that the three of them had obtained, they even treated the other inheritances in the Tao realm as their own and used them for their own use. But I do have a question. I don't know if I should ask. Although he had explained many of his doubts, Luo Fan still had some unresolved doubts, so he asked. The Taoist Chuan had a strong desire to talk, so he naturally wouldn't refuse to answer Luo Fan's question. Thus he said, "Fellow Taoist, feel free to ask. I once obtained an inheritance left behind by the five-element Tao sovereign 2,000 years ago. Why isn't there an inheritance elder like you there?" Luo Fan asked. So fellow Taoist actually obtained the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? What a good opportunity, what a good fortune! When the Taoist Chuan heard this, he was filled with deep respect, and an extremely envious expression appeared on his face. Look at his expression. Luo Fan thought to himself, sure enough. The three mysterious path had occupied the primordial Tao realm for 37 trillion years. Even if it was a random probe, every magic treasure and inheritance in the primordial Tao realm would definitely be discovered by them. The inheritance left behind by the five-element Tao sovereign was no exception. However, in this way, why would the projection left behind by the five-element Tao sovereign say that he hadn't seen any other living beings for tens of trillions of years? Could it be that the three mysterious path had countless genius disciples in the past 37 trillion years, but none of them were interested in the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? Or was it that the three mysterious path specifically forbade them from seizing the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? It's just a coincidence. Even though he thought this way, he still replied. Fellow Taoist, you may not know this, but the three mysterious path has been established for 37 trillion years. There are at least 100 billion genius disciples who have entered the primordial Tao realm, and more than half of them have tried to accept the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign. However, no matter how talented the genius disciples were, none of them were able to obtain the recognition of the magic treasure. None of them were able to see the true inheritance. No matter how powerful the disciples were, none of them were able to obtain the recognition of the magic treasure. None of them were able to see the true inheritance. Even the Tao sovereign of the five-element Tao sovereign had turned the inheritance treasure inside out countless times. He had even studied every detail of it in detail to the point where he could directly copy the magic treasure perfectly. However, he still couldn't find any traces of the existence of the inheritance within it. It was as if it was an ordinary magic treasure with no inheritance within it at all. If it weren't for the fact that almost all of the other 18 inheritances contained the powerful inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign, this magic treasure might have already been dismantled thousands of times. Fellow Taoist, to be able to obtain the inheritance, your luck is truly enviable. The Taoist Chuan looked at Luo Fan with a strange expression. Dao Chuan said. When Luo Fan heard this, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. The inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign was not difficult to obtain. Not to mention bypassing all the tests and directly going to the body of the magic treasure to see the projection of the five-element Tao sovereign and accept the inheritance. Just the rulers of the major forces like the Bloodwood King would pass the test in a few years. They accepted the inheritance. How come none of the billions of genius disciples of the three mysterious path were able to accept the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? Luo Fan thought this, but he naturally wouldn't say it out loud. He only said, "It was indeed luck. It seems that I must have met the requirements of the inheritance in some way, which is why I was able to obtain the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign." The Taoist Chuan said, "Fellow Taoist, your luck is truly amazing. What the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign looked like back then, and whether it even existed or not has become a mystery in the sect. Today, fellow Taoist has finally solved this mystery. Unfortunately, the sect has already." As the Taoist Chuan spoke, he thought of the current situation of the three mysterious path, and could not help but sigh. However, he was a rank 7 celestial realm being after all, so he had a strong ability to adjust his emotions. He quickly extricated himself from his emotions and his expression returned to normal. He said, "We legacy elders are disciples specially trained by the sect to manage the legacy. We did not obtain the legacy of Tao Master Five Elements, so naturally there are no legacy elders among us." He thought of the question Luo Fan had asked before and directly answered Luo Fan. Luo Fan had already expected this kind of answer, so he said, "So that's how it is. In that case, the many inheritances here are all the inheritances of this magic treasure. I just don't know which Tao Master's inheritance belongs to. The inheritance here belongs to Tao Master Aurora Polaris, as well as the inheritance obtained by the sect's ancestor Chuan Guang," Taoist Chuan said. As he spoke, Taoist Chuan seemed to think of something and hesitated slightly. After a while, he said, "I have something to trouble you with, but I don't know if it's too presumptuous or if the other inheritance elders will agree to it. Could you please wait here for a while, or perhaps look through some of the inheritances that can be passed on to outsiders while I discuss it with the other inheritance elders?" "Please go ahead," Taoist Chuan said. Luo Fan couldn't figure out what Chuan Daozi was thinking at the moment, so he was a little curious. Chuan Daozi apologized for his rudeness and opened a door. Behind that door were countless ancient books engraved with jade and other similar materials, allowing Luo Fan to read them at will. As for himself, he hurriedly left the guest area and went to another part of the manor to busy himself with something. Luo Fan shook his head and got up, entering the door that had suddenly appeared. As soon as he entered, he felt waves of ancient aura assaulting his senses. That aura did not come from anywhere else, but from the books on the bookshelves in front of him. It was clear that although these books were inheritances that could be passed on to outsiders, they were still extremely ancient and precious. To be continued. Chapter 799. Luo Fan could vaguely guess what Chuan Daozi had gone to do, so he wasn't in a hurry. He leisurely flipped through the countless books in the room. First published, these books were collected by the three mysterious Tao over the past 37 trillion years through various methods. Some of them were unrelated to the three mysterious Tao root. It was all-encompassing and involved many aspects that were unimaginably complex. Although it could not be said that it contained all the knowledge of the great heaven primordial world, but at least all aspects were involved. Of course, cultivation methods and divine arts were also a major category that couldn't be missed. Although these cultivation methods were not the fundamental cultivation methods of the three mysterious Tao, they were still the result of billions of years of accumulation and selection. Every single one of them was extremely profound, and every single one of them was extremely rare to find in the current Tianyuan world, which was the 838th inheritance. Among them, Luo Fan even saw many cultivation techniques that could allow cultivators to reach the top 3 grade. Of course, cultivation techniques that could allow cultivators to reach the upper 3 grades were naturally quite rare. Moreover, even these rare upper 3 grades cultivation techniques were usually incomplete or had fatal weaknesses or side effects. This kind of cultivation method was naturally not very meaningful to those who wanted to directly cultivate these methods to attain peerless abilities and transcend. It would only make them hesitant. However, for someone like Luo Fan, who wanted to create a cultivation method that was most suitable for him through reading books, it was the best choice. As a result, during the time that Chuan Daozi had left, Luo Fan had really put down everything and focused on reading through the numerous books, incorporating everything recorded in those books into his own memories. Chuan Daozi left for a full 2 hours. 2 hours later, when he returned with a heavy expression, he only saw Luo Fan standing in the ancient book vault that he had opened before with a face full of joy. Luo Fan's eyes were shining brightly, as if there were endless words and patterns constantly swimming in them. 838 continued succession with this. He could not help but be slightly stunned. The reason why he had opened the library for Luo Fan to read was because he was about to leave. He was afraid that it would be too rude, so he gave Luo Fan something to kill time. However, he did not expect that Luo Fan would really read the book seriously. It looked like he had gained a lot, so how could he not be surprised? These books are just ordinary books. Almost everything recorded in them can be found in the outside world. Why does fellow Taoist Luo Fan attach so much importance to them? Chuan Daozi thought to himself. However, he didn't think too much about it. He just thought that Luo Fan was thirsty for knowledge. At this moment, Luo Fan looked as if he was a disciple of the Tao. He was overjoyed, because during these 2 hours, he'd already memorized all the books in the library. Moreover, he'd noticed a few cultivation techniques amongst them that provided him with rather great enlightenment, allowing him to faintly grasp the path to create his own cultivation technique. This was already a huge gain for him, so it was naturally enough to make him happy. Chuan Daoist did not hide his arrival. As such, the moment he returned, Luo Fan had already discovered him. He stopped flipping through the books and turned around saying, "Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist. There are a lot of books here. But it's an eye-opener for me." Although Chuan Daoist was solemn, he did not act impolitely. He smiled and said, "The books here are just some ordinary books from the 3 mysterious paths. Since they're useful to you, it's my honor. How can I help you?" As he spoke, Luo Fan had already left the library and returned to the guest room. He sat down with Chuan Daoist. After sitting down, Chuan Daoist said, "Just now I used a secret technique to contact the other 17 inheritance elders. I told them about the changes outside the inheritance realm and discussed my plan with them. In the end, most of them didn't quite agree with my plan. Only 4 of them reluctantly agreed to my idea because of our friendship." As he spoke, he revealed a disappointed look. Luo Fan nodded to show that he understood. He knew that this must have something to do with what Chuan Daoist wanted him to do. He did not beat around the bush and said directly, "Fellow Daoist, you said that you have something to do. What is it?" Chuan Daoist looked a little gloomy. He stood up and bowed deeply to Luo Fan, saying, "I beg you, fellow Daoist, to accept the inheritance of the 3 mysterious paths and pass it down from the Tao realm. When the disciples of the 3 mysterious paths become Tao masters, they can come here to take the chaotic Tao realm and rebuild the 3 mysterious paths." Luo Fan heard Chuan Daoist's words and thought, as expected. He had guessed this before Chuan Daoist left, but when it really happened, he was still a little surprised and found it hard to imagine. "I've only known you for less than a day. Do you trust me so much?" Luo Fan sighed. Sometimes it doesn't take too long to understand a person. Although I've only known you for a short time, I can see that you are broad-minded and ambitious. Entrusting this matter to you is the best way to do it," Chuan Daoist said. When Luo Fan heard this, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. This reason was just for show. Although sometimes it didn't take too long to understand a person, it took a long time to confirm what kind of person a person was. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as a long time to see a person's heart. Chuan Daoist's words sounded good, but he was afraid that it was not the reason. The reason why Chuan Daoist entrusted the inheritance of the three mysterious paths to him was because he had no other choice. The three mysterious paths had disappeared for 300,000 years, and only Luo Fan, a stage 7 immortal realm existence, had come here to accept the inheritance. Who knew how many tens of thousands of years it would take for another creature to come here? Obviously, the faster the three mysterious paths' inheritance was inherited, the higher the chance of finding out the truth about the three mysterious paths' disappearance. Therefore, Chuan Daoist could only entrust the three mysterious paths' inheritance to Luo Fan. In fact, Luo Fan could even guess that there were at least 18 inheritances in the three mysterious paths, which corresponded to the 18 inheritance treasures of the 5 elements Tao Sovereign. Of the 5 that were given to him, it shouldn't include the most fundamental, powerful, and important inheritance of the three mysterious paths. Although he had guessed this, Luo Fan naturally wouldn't expose it. In any case, his current plan was to obtain the inheritance. Through comparing the various inheritances, he would create the most suitable cultivation method for himself so that his cultivation could catch up to or even surpass his body. No matter what Chuan Daoist was planning, he definitely had an inheritance for him. Since that was the case, how would the other party's considerations affect the outcome? Thus, Luo Fan only smiled and said, "Since you say so, then I naturally won't decline. I will naturally not decline. I will definitely pass down the three mysterious Tao." "Thank you, fellow Daoist." Chuan Daoist was overjoyed and bowed again. Luo Fan hurriedly helped Chuan Daoist up, but he said that he didn't dare to accept such a big bow. Chuan Daoist was very anxious at this moment and didn't have the mood to continue being polite with Luo Fan. He directly left the guest room with Luo Fan and turned to the back of the manor. Here, there was a path that led straight to the top of the mountain. This path twisted and turned, and it seemed to connect the countless buildings on the mountain together. Luo Fan looked at this path. With just a glance, he knew that this path was a path of trials. With every step forward, his mind and state of mind would be under greater pressure. If one were to reach the peak, the pressure on one's mental state would probably cause a 7th stage immortal realm cultivator's mind to collapse and his will to perish. This was also the strongest power of this inherited magic treasure. Looking at this path, Luo Fan knew that the building at the top of the mountain was most likely the most fundamental inheritance of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. Chuan Daoist led Luo Fan here. Naturally, he couldn't let Luo Fan take this test. After all, Luo Fan wasn't a disciple of the three mysterious paths. He had obtained the inheritance because Chuan Daoist had begged him to. How could he accept the test and obtain the inheritance like a disciple of the three mysterious paths? Chuan Daoist came here and knelt towards the mountain. He kowtowed 9 times and prayed, "Today, disciple has heard that the sex inheritance has been broken." Disciple boldly took out the inheritance and handed it to fellow Daoist outside to receive it. "Ancestors, please forgive disciple for violating the rules. Disciple is willing to face the wall for 1 billion years. Ancestors, please bear witness." As he spoke, he kowtowed 9 more times. Seeing this, Luo Fan realized that only 4 of the 18 inheritance elders were willing to make this decision with Chuan Daoist. Facing the wall for 1 billion years was not something an ordinary being could do. Even a rank 7 immortal realm cultivator would not be able to face such a fate. They probably wouldn't be happy to accept it. However, he didn't say anything else. What punishment and what price he would have to pay was up to Chuan Daoist himself, and it was his responsibility. Even Luo Fan, who had accepted the task, was in no position to persuade him. Thus, he could only pretend that he didn't know anything. After kowtowing, Chuan Daoist stood up with a resolute expression. He raised his hand and grabbed at the void. The void instantly distorted, and the entire mountain seemed to shake violently. It was as if the entire mountain had suddenly become a living thing. At the same time, the enchanted treasure, the world within it, everything within it, and all living beings began to tremble violently. It was as if the enchanted treasure had experienced a devastating shock. Fortunately, the shock disappeared as quickly as it came. In the blink of an eye, everything calmed down as if nothing had happened. Only a door appeared in front of Luo Fan. There was a strange light inside the door. This light was mysterious and unimaginably beautiful. Anyone who saw it would be stunned. It was Aurora Borealis. In an instant, Luo Fan knew what the light in front of him was. Seeing this light, Luo Fan took a deep breath. Just from this light, he knew how profound Dao Master Aurora Borealis's cultivation was. Although it was just a patch of light, it contained boundless vitality. One could even vaguely sense that there seemed to be billions of worlds within it. An indescribable aura of control seeped out from it, making the surrounding space seem to submit to the existence of the light. Chuan Daoist said, "Inside is all of Dao Master Aurora Borealis' inheritance. Fellow cultivator can directly enter and obtain it." Luo Fan couldn't wait any longer. After sensing it for a bit, he knew that this light was formed naturally from endless information. It didn't contain any power, so he bowed towards Chuan Daoist before turning around and stepping into the door. After Luo Fan stepped into the light, the door slowly shrank and turned into a fist-sized ball of light. It floated in the air, but it naturally gave off an extremely stable aura. It was as if it had existed since the beginning of time and would continue to exist forever. At this moment, the void distorted slightly and 4 doors appeared around Chuan Daoist. These doors were all different. One was pitch black, but it gave off an aura of calmness, nurturing, and peace. One was blazing white. It gave off an aura of endless holiness. One was gray, but it gave off an aura of time and light. The remaining one was transparent, like nothingness, and only an aura of power was brewing within it. These 4 doors, along with the one that Chuan Daoist had opened earlier, they were the inheritances of 5 of the 18 sects of the 3 Xian Dao. Among them, the pitch-black door was from Dao Master Darkness, the blazing white door was from Dao Master Light, the gray door was from the current Dao Master, and the last one was from Dao Master Strength. The inheritances of the 4 Dao Masters and Dao Master Aurora Borealis weren't the weakest in the 3 Xian Dao. However, they weren't the strongest either. They were in the middle stages. Every Dao Master's inheritance was extremely powerful, and it was enough to guide any cultivator from an ordinary being to a Dao Master. It was just as Luo Fan had expected. These 5 inheritances were indeed extremely important to the 3 Xian Dao. However, this wasn't the most important. Even if it was spread out, it would at most cause some losses, but it wouldn't shake the foundation of the 3 Xian Dao. As the 4 doors appeared, light figures gradually distorted and changed beside each door. In the end, they formed the appearances of 4 middle-aged men. The 4 middle-aged men all had different appearances, and their auras were also quite different. To be more specific, they had many similarities to the doors beside them. However, it didn't matter how the 4 of them looked. Regardless of how their auras were, their cultivation level was only at the 7th step of the immortal realm. Moreover, they were only at the 4th or 4th stage of the immortal realm. In other places they might be considered extremely impressive, but in the context of the 3 Xian Dao, they were rather shabby. Fellow junior brothers, we have been cultivating a special inheritance method since birth, and our cultivation has been limited to the level of the inheritance treasure. In the future, it is impossible for us to transcend. Therefore, the inheritance of the sect is our only responsibility, our only work, and the only thing we can do for the sect. This time, you have not let down your sect by agreeing to my decision. I thank you all here. When Chuan Daozi saw the shadows of the men, he solemnly bowed. The men bowed in return and said in unison, "For the sect's inheritance, we will not hesitate to die 10,000 times." Putting aside how determined Chuan Daozi and the others were after Luo Fan entered, Luo Fan felt as if his entire body had completely melted the moment he stepped into the aurora. In an instant, his body became invisible and his mind expanded infinitely. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to a point where even he could not perceive its boundaries. In the process of his mind expanding to infinite levels, endless information suddenly poured into his mind from all directions. The information was all-encompassing, from breathing, to comprehending the laws of laws, to how to become a Tao master, how to become a sage, and everything else. Moreover, the information was not messy. Instead, it was in an extremely strict order. Which techniques came first, which techniques came last, which techniques were related to these techniques, and which techniques complemented each other. There was not a trace of chaos in all of this. Even if it was a creature without any cultivation foundation, as long as it received the information in order, it would not be difficult for it to understand. Of course, if it was a creature without any cultivation foundation, it would only take a moment for the huge amount of information to burst his mind and his consciousness to completely collapse. After all, the amount of information was so huge that it had reached a shocking level. Even with Luo Fan's ability to accept, he felt a swelling pain in his head at this moment. His mind showed signs of being unable to accept it. So this is the inheritance of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. It seems that it is no less than the inheritance of Tao Master 5 Element. Luo Fan could only sigh with emotion at this time. Tao Master Aurora Polaris cultivated the Aurora Magnetism Tao. The Aurora Magnetism Tao was an extremely mysterious existence. In Tao Master Aurora Polaris's view of the world, everything in the universe came from the Aurora Magnetism Tao. It was because of the Aurora Magnetism Tao that the boundless, vast, and high Tianyuan universe was created. This view of the world was completely different from that of Tao Master 5 Element and even from that of Luo Fan. However, as a view of the world created by a Tao Master, this view of the world could naturally be self-justifying and even extremely perfect. There was no trace of omission at all. Using this view of the world, it could even explain many things that Tao Master 5 Element could not explain. There was even no distinction between the heavenly laws and the heavenly laws. There was only one fundamental method, and as long as one cultivated according to it, one could reach the saint realm. From the endless information that poured into his mind, Luo Fan gradually understood Tao Master Aurora Polaris's view of the world, and could not help but sigh with emotion. At the same time, he also had a little enlightenment. Perhaps a special, different view of the world is the reason why these Tao Masters can transcend all living beings and become high and mighty Tao Masters, and have the qualification to set foot on the road to Saint. Chapter 800. Although he had such a guess, Luo Fan could only keep it in mind at this time. After all, the Tao Master inheritances he had seen were only those of Tao Master 5 Elements and Tao Master Aurora Polaris. If he used the common points of these two inheritances to guess the common points of all Tao Master inheritances, it would naturally be quite incomplete and very likely to be very different from the truth. Therefore, Luo Fan only kept this conjecture in mind, and was ready to confirm whether it was true after collecting more Tao Master's inheritance. With this in mind, he suppressed the idea of directly creating his own cultivation method. Instead, He planned to continue accumulating knowledge and constantly incorporate the many cultivation methods that Tao Master Aurora Polaris had passed down into his memory. His mind was also doing its best to analyze and understand these cultivation methods. As time went by, the inheritance that Luo Fan received became more and more complete. The cultivation true meaning of Tao Master Aurora Polaris and his worldview also became more and more complete. If Luo Fan didn't have his own unique worldview, if he didn't already know the worldview of Tao Master Five Elements, he might have completely believed in this incomparably perfect worldview when he knew about Tao Master Aurora Polaris worldview. He believed that the structure of all the world was really as described in Tao Master Aurora Polaris worldview, that it was really constructed by the aurora magnetism. After completely absorbing all of Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance into his own memory, Luo Fan's mind slowly shrank. His originally invisible and intangible body also became solid again. In the end, Luo Fan's figure formed in the endless aurora. At this moment, the aurora around him no longer had any secrets in his eyes. These auroras were formed by boundless information. Each aurora could be divided into countless words, patterns, lines, and symbols. At this time, all of these had been completely absorbed into Luo Fan's own memory. As long as he glanced at it, it would naturally trigger his memory, allowing him to directly see through the surface. He directly saw the many words, patterns, lines, and symbols. It turns out that it's also a virtual space-time born from the mind. Apart from this much information, everything else is fake. Looking at the endless information around him, Luo Fan thought so. At this moment, he already knew that 3 years had passed in the outside world since he stepped into this illusory space until now. With a thought, his figure left that space-time. He appeared at the place where he was before he entered the virtual space-time. When he left the illusory space-time, the light ball that belonged to Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance at Luo Fan's original location shook slightly. The void trembled and the light ball disappeared into the void. It disappeared in front of Luo Fan, and even Luo Fan could not find its existence. Luo Fan looked around but did not see Chuan Daozi. Knowing that Chuan Daozi must have gone to face the wall to receive his punishment, he could not help but sigh. As for the 4 doors that appeared in front of him, he didn't need to think too much to know that they were the inheritances of the other 4 paths. Each door corresponded to a Tao Master's inheritance. Judging from its structure, there was no need to worry. The method of accepting the inheritance was no different from the method of accepting Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. Similarly, he just had to step into it. Seeing this, Luo Fan did not hesitate and directly chose the door closest to Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. It was also the pitch-black door that belonged to Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. As soon as he stepped into it, he felt like he had stepped into the door of Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. There was also endless information pouring in, and his mind expanded infinitely. His body turned invisible and intangible. Aside from the difference in the quality of the information pouring in, everything else was the same as when he entered Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. In this kind of situation, Luo Fan had already experienced it once, so he naturally had no obstacles in doing it again. The speed at which he received information and extracted the true meaning from the information was much faster. The speed at which he understood all sorts of mysteries was much faster than when he entered Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. As time passed, Luo Fan took out more and more of the darkness Tao Sovereign's true meaning of cultivation. He gradually understood the darkness Tao Sovereign's cultivation path. This understanding made him even more certain of his previous conjecture. This was because, although the cultivation method of the Darkness Lord did not directly express that the world was constructed by something special in the name of the sect, the Darkness Lord's cultivation method did not directly state that the world was constructed by something special. However, it also had its own unique and different worldview. This worldview was not only different from Luo Fan's, but also the worldview of Tao Master Aurora Polaris and Tao Master Five Element. It was even different from the worldview of many living beings in the Great Tianyuan world. In the eyes of Tao Master Aurora Polaris, darkness was the source of chaos, the beginning of the world, and the root of all things. All matter, all heaven and earth, all energy, even chaos, originated from the endless darkness. In Tao Master Aurora Polaris's worldview, before chaos, the place where chaos originally existed was an incomparably pure and endless darkness. This darkness contained everything that all living beings could imagine, as well as everything that all living beings couldn't imagine. At a certain moment, before the beginning of time, before the birth of space, the darkness naturally evolved and gave birth to endless chaos. After that, many chaotic creatures condensed in the state of chaos. These chaotic creatures opened up an infinite world, including the Great Tianyuan world. Therefore, in Tao Master Aurora Polaris's eyes, darkness was everything in the world. Even if it was an ancestor in the state of chaos, as long as he mastered darkness, he could control everything. He could control all power, all heaven and earth, all spacetime, and even the endless state of chaos. This worldview was grander and more imposing than that of Tao Master Aurora Polaris, Tao Master Five Element, and even Luo Fan. Tao Master Aurora Polaris and the others only put their worldview into chaos. They believed that the boundless chaos was formed by the five elements, Aurora Polaris, magnetism, and other fundamental forces and substances. However, Tao Master Aurora Polaris's worldview went deep into the state of chaos, and he went deep into the beginning of the boundless state of chaos. This imposing manner and the grandeur of this worldview amazed Luo Fan. If an ordinary creature had such a worldview, it would at most make others think that he was biting off more than he could chew and that his thinking had gone astray. However, if a Tao Master had such a worldview, it would naturally not be as simple as an ordinary person's worldview. A Tao Master would generally accept it. It could only be achieved after cultivating for hundreds of millions of years. In such a long period of time, if his worldview could withstand the test of countless facts and all the disproof he had seen, then his worldview must be extremely perfect. It must also be self-justifying. Otherwise, it would have been modified by the Tao Master to be more in line with the facts. At this time, the worldview of Tao Master Darkness was no exception. Although everything began with darkness and controlling darkness meant controlling everything in the state of chaos, this worldview was so incredible. However, in his cultivation method, in the various facts recorded, and in the various conclusions he had refined. But everything seemed so natural. Even using such a worldview could explain all the facts that Luo Fan had seen so far, and could explain all the facts that he could imagine. In this case, if he hadn't seen a few different, equally perfect, and self-justifying worldviews, he might have really believed in such a worldview and regarded it as his own. Luo Fan suppressed his impulse to believe in that worldview with an extremely strong will. He began to analyze the inheritance of Tao Master Darkness from a detached perspective. Compared with the worldview of other Tao Masters of Five Elements and Tao Master Aurora Polaris, the worldview of Tao Master Darkness was many times more tempting to Luo Fan. This was the influence of the habits he had brought when he was a mortal in the Earth universe in his previous life. In the Earth universe, the worldview he established was established by many so-called scientists who studied the Earth universe. This worldview was so grand. It even reached the beginning of creation, the origin of the universe, the end of the future of the Earth universe, and even the situation before the Earth universe. There were many speculations and many models. Luo Fan, who grew up in such an environment, naturally had a desire to get to the bottom of everything. As for other worldviews, even the worldviews of Tao Master Aurora Polaris and Tao Master Five Elements, the ultimate root was only the state of chaos. They only explained how the world was formed and how the state of chaos was formed. No worldview could be like the worldview of Tao Master Darkness. It directly explained how the state of chaos appeared and what the state before the state of chaos was like. It did not establish any model that could be touched. In this case, the worldview of Tao Master Darkness answered all the doubts that Luo Fan might have and established a model that even Luo Fan almost completely believed. It was easy to imagine how attractive this was to him. Fortunately, after all, Luo Fan was not a mortal in his previous life. The worldview he established in his previous life had long been subverted by his countless years of cultivation experience. He gradually formed his own worldview. Although he had not completely sorted it out, it was incomparably firm and had almost formed an indelible mark in the depths of his soul. Therefore, although this worldview of Tao Master Darkness was infinitely attractive to him, it still could not truly shake his worldview. It could not truly make him abandon all other worldviews and believe in this worldview. The inheritance method of Tao Master Darkness was not much more complicated than the inheritance method of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. The information contained in the endless darkness inside the inheritance gate was not much more than the information contained in the aurora of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. Under such circumstances, even if this view of the world had brought Luo Fan even more shock, it had only been a short 3 years since he had received all these inheritances and information, reaching the point where he could completely see through the boundless darkness around him. After 3 years, Luo Fan opened his eyes. There were 2 faint dark nebulas in his eyes, as if they could attract everything. I didn't expect to gain so much. Fortunately, I came here. Otherwise, even if I created a cultivation method, it would be difficult to achieve the results I imagined. Luo Fan thought. There weren't many cultivation techniques in Tao's sovereign darkness inheritance, only a few thousand of them. However, outside of these thousands of cultivation techniques, there were billions of words, diagrams, lines, and symbols that annotated these cultivation techniques, expanded these cultivation techniques, and proved these cultivation techniques. This was Tao Master Darkness worldview. It was contained in these annotations, these expansions, and these proofs. Over the past 3 years, although Luo Fan was able to maintain a firm Tao heart and not immediately believe in the dark worldview, he was also deeply affected by it. However, he had also been deeply influenced by Tao's sovereign darkness. From Tao's sovereign darkness explanation, expansion, and proof, he understood Tao's sovereign darkness thoughts, felt the sparks of thought and the light of wisdom. He already had some ideas about how to truly organize his worldview. That's right, this was what Luo Fan thought after accepting the inheritance of Tao Master Darkness. It was no longer to immediately open up his own cultivation method, but to first organize his worldview. After accepting the inheritance of the 3 Tao Masters, he had roughly confirmed that if he wanted to truly succeed in his cultivation and become a Tao Master or even a sage, he needed to have his own complete worldview. This worldview might not need to be completely different from other living beings like those Tao Masters. However, he had to be convinced, and he had to be able to justify himself and be able to obtain facts to prove it. That was the only way. Only then could he become a Tao Master and reach the sage realm. Although Luo Fan already had his own worldview, his own understanding of the universe, and the chaos, all of this was intermittent and fragmented. It was a collection of fragments produced during his countless years of cultivation. They didn't even form a complete whole, let alone express them. And if he could not express it, then this worldview. Naturally, it could not be the foundation of his cultivation, nor could it support his root cultivation method. Under such circumstances, even if he were to create some profound cultivation method, it would definitely be unable to truly conform to his knowledge and comprehension of the world. Although he still did not know how to become a sage at this time. But he knew that as long as there were these drawbacks, then he would definitely not be able to truly become a sage. In this case, it was easy to imagine what Luo Fan would choose. However, even if he had established a fairly complete worldview, It was still a huge project for him to completely organize it and transform it into a clear expression, and even use it as the foundation of his cultivation. This was like an ordinary person clearly knowing that 1 + 1 = 2, but if you really wanted to explain the truth and prove this equation, even a top mathematician would need decades of research to be able to do it. In this case, even if Luo Fan wanted to organize his worldview, he did not immediately start. Instead, he directly moved his mind and stepped out of the inheritance gate of Tao Master Darkness. He once again arrived at the foot of the inheritance mountain of Tao Master Aurora Light, where several portals appeared together. The moment he left the portal, the light that the portal had turned into shook and disappeared, just like the previous inheritance gate of Tao Master Aurora Light. It was as if As had never appeared. Without hesitation, Luo Fan directly entered the inheritance gate of Tao Master Light next to him and continued to accept the inheritance of Tao Master Light. The inheritance of Tao Master Light, Tao Master Darkness, and Tao Master Aurora Light were poured into Luo Fan's mind in the same way. At this time, Luo Fan naturally understood that this inheritance method must not be the original inheritance method of these Tao Masters. These Tao Masters had different cultivation methods, and even their worldviews were completely different. How could they use the same inheritance method? The reason why they looked so similar and practically identical was naturally due to the efforts of the few legacy elders. Even if he did not hear the conversation between Chuan Daozi and the other inheritance elders, he could guess that these inheritance gates were probably some kind of variation of the inheritance elders' cultivation method. It was a variation that the Three Mysterious Path had specially researched for billions of years to unify the inheritance method. It was a variation that made it more efficient and convenient to accept the inheritance. However, this was meaningless to Luo Fan. The moment he stepped into the inheritance gate of Tao Master Light, he also felt endless information pouring into his mind. This information was the inheritance of Tao Master Light. 3 years later, when Luo Fan stepped out of the inheritance gate of Tao Master Light, he completely obtained the inheritance of Tao Master Light. He even obtained the true meaning of Tao Master Light's cultivation and completely understood his worldview. Although Tao Master Light's name was opposite to Tao Master Darkness's, his worldview was completely different from Tao Master Darkness's. Their worldviews were just completely different. It's a pity that Tao Master Light's worldview is much weaker than Tao Master Darkness's. Although Luo Fan was impressed by Tao Master Light's worldview, such a thought still appeared in his mind. This was because, although Tao Master Light's worldview was perfect and could be justified, it was only the same as Tao Master Five Elements and Tao Master Aurora Light's worldview. It could only explain the state of primal chaos and was unable to reach the state before the primal chaos state. In terms of grandeur and boldness, he was inferior to Tao Master Darkness. To be continued. Chapter 801. Although he felt that the world view of the Light Tao Master was not as grand as that of the Darkness Tao Master, Luo Fo was still quite satisfied. After all, the world view of the Light Tao Master was quite perfect, allowing him to see a world view that was completely different from that of the other Tao Masters. It had a lot of inspiration for him to sort out his own world view. After a while, he turned around and entered the remaining gray door. It had the charm of the flow of time. It was the current Tao Master's gate of inheritance. Similarly, the current Tao Master's gate of inheritance was the same as that of the Light Tao Master, the Darkness Tao Master, and the Aurora Tao Master. They used the same method to enter and accept the inheritance. However, there was nothing to say. However, the amount of information that the current Tao Master had inherited was several times more than that of the Light Tao Master. It took Luo Fan 4 years to completely absorb all of the inheritance into his own memory. After completely accepting the current Tao Master's gate of inheritance, the current Tao Master's gate of inheritance also disappeared. Although Luo Fan's eyes were filled with joy and satisfaction, He was not as shocked as he was when he came out of the darkness Tao Master's gate of inheritance. Obviously, although the current Tao Master also had his own special worldview, and it was even from a completely different point of view from the Light Tao Master and the others. He regarded the whole world as a fragment of time, and the whole chaos as a collection of countless duly moments. However, his worldview was the same as the Light Tao Master, the Aurora Tao Master, and the Five Elements Tao Master. It was also in a state of chaos, and in terms of spirit, it was far inferior to the Darkness Tao Master. Although this kind of worldview had many benefits for Luo Fan, it naturally could not shock Luo Fan, who had seen the Darkness Tao Master's worldview before. Gathering his thoughts, Luo Fan turned around and entered the last remaining door, the transparent gate of inheritance belonging to the Herculean Tao Master. As soon as he entered, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. This sense of familiarity was so strong that Luo Fan instantly found the source. The source was the incarnation of the will of the Earth universe. This was the Herculean Tao Master's gate of inheritance. It was a world of power that was demonstrated and simulated by the infinite information gathered in one place. The world of power, the universe of power. Although the surroundings were transparent, without any substance, light, or luster, with Luo Fan's familiarity with power, he was able to sense it. Based on the feeling he received from the incarnation of the will of the Earth universe, he knew that the surroundings were not empty, but filled with countless extremely pure powers. These powers formed an extremely mysterious universe of power. At this moment, the boundless information that poured into his mind from the surrounding world confirmed his feeling. The worldview of Tao Venerable Hercules was the same as that of Luo Fan's will incarnation in the Earth universe. However, it was countless times more perfect than the incarnation. It was countless times grander. The consciousness incarnation was formed from a grand heavenly realm power that was condensed by the formation. Its body was the power, which was why it had vision. His senses were all senses of power. Therefore, his worldview was naturally the worldview of power. In his eyes, the entire universe, the heavens and earth, and the entire world were made up of energy. Even profound existences like time and space were only constructed by the power of time and space. This worldview was exactly the same as Tao Master Dali's. However, it was obvious. Herculean Tao Master was a Tao Master who had surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. The power of his divine sense and his knowledge were many times stronger than Luo Fan's body, let alone the will doppelganger. In this case, what he saw, the worldview that he felt and could form was naturally not only at the level of the will incarnation. It was naturally not limited to the simple level of that year's incarnation. Tao Master Dali's worldview was perfect to an unimaginable level. Moreover, this worldview even surpassed the state of chaos. Like the worldview of Tao Master Darkness, it reached the source of chaos and reached the state before the state of chaos was formed. In his eyes, what existed before the state of chaos was a power. A vast and magnificent power that all living beings, even existences at the peak of the saint realm, could not imagine. The form of existence of this power was extremely mysterious and profound. It was the beginning of power, the origin of power. Then, for some reason, this power changed. Its form of construction underwent some kind of wonderful change, thus forming a boundless state of chaos. Although such a state of chaos seemed to be completely different from the power, it was still power in essence. It was just that the form of the power had changed. Then, the chaos evolved and produced countless powerful chaotic creatures. It changed the power composition of a certain part of the state of chaos and formed countless perfect worlds. After various evolutions, one of the perfect worlds finally formed the Tianyuan Great World, where Luo Fan was and where Tao Master Dali was. Even such a great Tianyuan world was still power in terms of quality. It was just a special combination of countless types of power that were combined in countless complicated ways. The state of chaos in essence was no different from the state before the state of chaos originated. Such a view of the world made Luo Fan feel like he had obtained a treasure. In an instant, he knew that the inheritance of Dali Dao Master might not be the same as the inheritance of other Dao Masters, which could only be used as a reference to sort out one's own worldview. Instead, it could have a greater effect. That was, he could transfer the inheritance of Dali Dao Master to the universe on Earth and hand it over to the incarnation of thought. The incarnation of thought was a kind of power. If he could obtain such a perfect inheritance, even if it was different from the world, he would definitely obtain endless benefit. The boundary of the Tao Xing realm could rise rapidly, and even all the bottlenecks to reach the Dao Master realm would become extremely fragile. With such a thought, Luo Fan was quite excited. No matter how his incarnation of thought changed and rose, it was impossible to go beyond the control of the body. Therefore, the stronger the incarnation of thought, the better it would be for him. Moreover, if the incarnation of thought could cultivate to the Dao Master realm, he would also be able to feel what kind of realm the Dao Master realm was. From there, he would be able to obtain countless mysterious divine senses that the Dao Master realm possessed. He might even be able to use such mysterious divine senses to prove the Tao with the strength of the body. Conversely, the cultivation realm of the body, of course, the last possibility was only the best-case scenario. After all, the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord was qualitatively different from the Tao fruit of Luo Fan's body. He wanted to use the incarnation of the great strength Tao Lord to break through the cultivation barrier of the body. The conditions required during that period would be indescribably numerous. Naturally, it would be difficult to succeed. With this kind of mentality, Luo Fan spent more effort on the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord than the other Tao Masters. He tried his best to understand the huge amount of cultivation methods and discussions involved in the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord. Under these circumstances, although the amount of information in the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord was only comparable to the inheritance of the dark Tao Lord, Luo Fan still spent a full 6 years to absorb all the information into his own memory. After doing all this, Luo Fan looked around. His perspective had completely changed. The world around him was no longer as transparent and empty as before. Instead, it had become a colorful and incomparably abstract world. This world was very similar to the world in the eyes of the incarnation of his will in the universe on Earth, but it was even more complicated and mysterious. It was a world of power, colorful and strange. The incomparably abstract existence was a mysterious power. Of course, these powers were made up of. It was still just an endless amount of information. After all, this was only the inside of the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord. It also contained the understanding of power that the great strength Tao Lord had created. Looking at this ever-changing world, Luo Fan's eyes showed a look of satisfaction. With a thought, he had already left the door. Turning around, the ball of light formed by the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord slowly disappeared in front of him, hidden in the formlessness. Seeing this, Luo Fan let out a leisurely sigh, a look of reluctance in his eyes. What he was unwilling to part with was naturally not the inheritance of the great strength Tao Lord, but the fact that there were dozens of other inheritances similar to the great strength Tao Lord. However, he had to leave this place before he obtained them. This was the truth that he was reluctant to part with. After letting out a sigh, he turned around and returned to the hall he was in before. It took him 19 years to accept the inheritance of the 5 Tao Masters. It was obvious that Chuan Daozi had been facing the wall for 19 years, but he wouldn't be waiting for him in this guest hall. Luo Fan was also aware of this situation. However, he knew that Chuan Daozi's consciousness was definitely left behind in this hall. Sure enough, as soon as he arrived in the hall, he felt an invisible intent wrap around the spot where Chuan Daozi had been sitting. At this moment, His consciousness was quiet and still, as if he had fallen into a deep slumber. Luo Fan bowed to the will and said, "I have already obtained the 5 great inheritances of your sect. I will definitely not let you down in the future. Now that the matter is over, I will take my leave." The will condensed slightly, and Chuan Daozi's cross-legged figure appeared. However, at this moment, his face was no longer as dignified and imposing as before. Instead, it was like a withered tree. He sat cross-legged and bowed to Luo Fan, saying, "I am facing the wall, so it is not convenient for me to send you off. I hope you will forgive me. I only hope that you will not forget what I asked of you. I will be eternally grateful." Luo Fan said, "Don't worry, fellow Daozi." Chuan Daozi sighed and casually waved his hand, causing a door to appear in front of Luo Fan. He said, "With your ability, you will naturally have no problem leaving this treasure. However, I invited you here, so how can I let you leave by yourself? This door leads to the outside of the magic treasure. Please, fellow Daozi." Luo Fan smiled and didn't hesitate. He bowed to Chuan Daozi's will and stepped into the door. The moment he stepped through the door, a strange feeling of time and space surged into his heart. As the light and shadow changed, it was as if he had experienced countless worlds and spacetimes. By the time the light and shadow stabilized, he had already left the hall and arrived at another place. Below him, there was a huge mirror floating in the dusky void. Within the mirror, there was a vast world that was developing in an orderly manner. He had already arrived outside the magic treasure world. After Luo Fan left, the portal that had sent him out slowly turned into nothingness and eventually disappeared, never to be seen again. Luo Fan looked at the magic treasure below and sighed. The harvest this time is too great. At this moment, deep within the world of the magic treasure, in the great hall where Luo Fan had been, Chuan Daozi's will was at a loss. He muttered, "I don't know if what I'm doing is right or wrong. This person should be trustworthy. What happened back then? Why did a powerful sect like my 3 mysterious sect disappear without a trace? Could it be that a sage took action? Or did he move away from the great heaven origin world? What is it?" As he muttered to himself, the figure formed by his will gradually faded and dissipated. Then, the voice disappeared into nothingness. Luo Fan naturally did not know what Chuan Daozi had said after he left. At this moment, he was floating above the mirror and using the qi gazing technique to look around. In the blink of an eye, he found the entrance to the chaotic Tao realm. Without any hesitation, his body turned into a streak of light and shot towards the entrance at an unimaginable speed. At this moment, although he had not completely achieved his goal in the chaotic Tao realm, however, he had already achieved the best result he could at this moment. As a result, there was no longer any need for him to stay inside the chaotic Tao realm. Most importantly, he had already promised Daozi Chuan that he would receive the inheritance, and this chaotic origin Tao realm was the inheritance of the 3 mysterious path. It could be considered a place of inheritance for the 3 mysterious path. Before he knew about it, he could stay here and cultivate. Now that he knew about it, naturally, it would not be good for him to continue staying here. With Luo Fan's speed, a distance of tens of millions of kilometers was nothing to him. In just a few breaths, Luo Fan had crossed a long distance. He arrived at the entrance of the chaotic Tao realm. There was an ordinary door here. This door was simple and unadorned, as if it was made of countless stones piled up like sand. Astonishingly, it was the same as the door outside. It looked exactly the same, without any difference. Luo Fan already knew the special characteristics of the door. He knew that he needed a spirit guide to enter and exit the Tao realm. As a result, he took out the spirit guide from his sleeve universe, and it naturally resonated with the door. The door slowly opened. An incomparably vivid world appeared. Then, he took a step forward and stepped into the door. As light and shadow flashed, he disappeared from the chaotic Tao realm. When he reappeared, He was already at the top of the mountain where the door stood. He stood on the mountain. He lowered his head and looked around him. Although it had been over 2,000 years since he had last stepped onto this hill, his surroundings were still the same as they were 2,000 years ago. It was as though time had stopped on this hill. Even the tiniest speck of dust did not change at all. At first glance, it seemed as if he had stepped into the door and then immediately stepped out again. Luo Fan stood there with an extremely calm expression on his face. 2,000 years might seem long to mortals, but to him, it was as short as the blink of an eye. Naturally, it was impossible for it to cause a change in his mind, and it was even more impossible for him to have any thoughts of the vicissitudes of life. With a slight thought, the map of the world of the ruins appeared in his mind. This map was naturally not the widely circulated map that was engraved on the surface of the sealed spirit. Instead, it was the map in the depths of the sealed spirit. It covered an area that was more than 10 times wider than the surface map. Only a map that was 10 times wider could cover his current location. After some consideration, he chose an incomparably safe and calm building that was marked on the map. He didn't let Feng Ling and the others come out of his sleeve, nor did he think about his destination in the world of the ruins. He directly chose that location and took a step forward. In a few steps, he crossed tens of thousands of miles and arrived in front of the building. This was a pavilion that was so simple that it even seemed ordinary. Although this pavilion seemed to have a long history, and every piece of material in the pavilion showed the aura of at least 10 million years of age, it did not have the special power that other buildings possessed. It was as if it was really just an ordinary pavilion. Of course, this pavilion could not be ordinary. In fact, although this pavilion looked ordinary, it emitted an aura that calmed one's mind and eliminated distracting thoughts. As soon as any living being stepped into the vicinity of this pavilion, or rather, as soon as they stepped into the level of the world that this pavilion was located in, they would naturally feel their hearts calm down, and they would naturally feel that they had entered the best state of cultivation. This was also the reason why Luo Fan chose this pavilion. He gently pushed open the door of the pavilion, and a vast space appeared before Luo Fan. The door of the pavilion did not have any defenses or seals. With a gentle push, it would naturally open. The space within the pavilion was not like a room, but a boundless starry sky. The darkness was dotted with specks of stars. The moment the pavilion opened, the stars began to flash as if a switch had been turned on. One could even faintly see the stars revolving according to an extremely complex and mysterious method. Luo Fan stepped inside and the door slowly closed behind him. After sensing it, Luo Fan understood that the door had been fortified with countless defenses. If someone outside wanted to pass through, they would need to have the cultivation of a rank 7 Celestial Realm cultivator. Otherwise, unless Luo Fan opened the door from the inside or destroyed the pavilion. Sure enough, as I thought, it is indeed a special place for cultivation. Luo Fan smiled as such a thought flashed through his mind. To be continued. Chapter 802. At this moment, he felt that he suddenly had some kind of mysterious connection with the starry sky around him, as if the whole starry sky was under his control at this moment. First written novel, fastest updated novel on the internet. With a slight move of his mind, the whole starry sky changed in an instant, forming a flat surface in front of him. It was a flat surface that was very similar to the one in his magic treasure, the Void Wuji Palace in the Untainted World. This flat surface was extremely mysterious. It did not have any thickness, nor did it have any ups and downs. It was as if a mathematical abstraction of the plane had been directly materialized. Luo Fan stepped onto the flat surface, which naturally formed a futon. He sat cross-legged. These were all born of Luo Fan's thoughts. Naturally, he did not hesitate. In a few steps, he came to the futon and sat cross-legged. As he sat down, the whole starry sky seemed to be suppressed by some kind of terrifying force. It began to change subtly. The change in the way of circulation was based on the flat surface where Luo Fan was sitting. All the changes seemed to be born because of this flat surface and died because of this flat surface. These were not controlled by Luo Fan, but the natural changes in the room. Luo Fan did not care too much about this. After sitting cross-legged and customizing, he slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, what he needed to do was not to begin to sort out his worldview, but to refine the inheritance of the 6 Tao Masters that he had obtained earlier into a compressed whole. The foundation of sorting out his worldview was the inheritance of the 6 Tao Masters. Obviously, sorting out his worldview was more important than Luo Fan could imagine, but he needed to unify all the wisdom and strength of his untainted world, the earth and the universe, and the Tianyuan Great World to be able to do it. In this case, he naturally needed to pass the inheritance of the 6 Tao Masters to the untainted world body, and then pass it to the earth-universe body through the untainted world body. Only in this way could he have the foundation to unify the wisdom of the 3. And apparently so. It was not easy to transmit information between 2 worlds that were separated by an unknown amount of space. Even if there was some kind of subtle connection between the main body and the doppelgangers, it was still not an easy task. It took Luo Fan 3 years to accept the inheritance of the 6 Tao Masters, even the inheritance of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. It was easy to imagine how much information was contained in the legacies of the 6 Tao Masters. If this information was transmitted to a body that was separated by an unknown amount of space like inheritance, how long would it take? How much energy would it take? The final result might even be intermittent, making the inheritance incomplete. After all, the space-time between the 2 worlds was completely different. In the 2 consecutive moments in the Tianyuan Great World, the body in the primordial world might have been separated by countless years. It was obvious. A method with all these drawbacks was naturally undesirable. Therefore, in order for Luo Fan to pass the inheritance of the 6 great Tao Masters to his body, he needed to refine the amount of information in the inheritance and compress it into a whole that not even the fractured spacetime could separate. Only in this way could the body in the primordial world completely and quickly receive the information of the inheritance. After closing his eyes, countless methods of Tao Master 5 elements began to appear in Luo Fan's mind. In the inheritance of the 6 great Tao Masters, the inheritance of Tao Master 5 elements was the one that Luo Fan was most familiar with. After all, he had been comprehending it for 2,000 years. The countless cultivation methods of the inner heaven method and the outer heaven method filled his mind, almost making his mind feel full. Luo Fan's mind was so wide that it was unimaginable that he could feel full at this time. This was enough to show how much information the inheritance of Tao Master 5 elements contained. In this regard, Luo Fan had long expected this, but at this time, he was not in a hurry. He constantly extracted the countless cultivation methods one by one, turning them into mysterious lines, and began to outline and build in a corner of his mind. He was extremely familiar with these cultivation methods, and even took out the countless gist of trueness of the inner heaven method. At this time, the process of extracting the cultivation methods and turning them into lines developed extremely quickly. It only took 3 years. The endless cultivation methods were completely turned into mysterious and complex lines, piling up in a corner of Luo Fan's mind, forming a seemingly messy huge ball of lines. Although many of the cultivation techniques had transformed the lines, they were still extremely powerful. However, every single line contained all the information about the cultivation method. Not a single trace of it was left out. As long as he changed it slightly, he would be able to turn it into a new cultivation method. After all the cultivation methods contained in the inner heaven method and the outer heaven method were transformed into lines, their volume was reduced by hundreds of millions of times. This made Luo Fan's originally full mind become empty in an instant. After the last cultivation method was added, the ball of lines suddenly shook and suddenly scattered, spreading towards his entire mind. The moment it came into contact with the limit of Luo Fan's mind, it suddenly shrank and condensed into a strange shape in the blink of an eye. It was a middle-aged man with a high hat and a wide belt. His face was extremely dignified, and every line around him seemed to condense the infinite mystery of the world. Every change in his body seemed to be the evolution of the Great Way, as if the world was naturally flowing. When his eyes opened and closed, it seemed to contain the infinite world. This image was not deliberately controlled by Luo Fan. Instead, it was naturally formed by the interaction of the infinite cultivation methods and the interaction of the lines. It was also the combination of all the lines, the most perfect, the most stable, and the most inseparable whole. Luo Fan sensed the wonderful existence that appeared in his mind, and suddenly a kind of understanding appeared in his heart. This should be the appearance of Tao Master 5 Elements. With a thought, he blasted a powerful thought towards the middle-aged man. This thought was so powerful that even if it happened in the outside world, it was enough to completely wipe out any existence in the 6th stage of Immortal Realm, and it was enough to completely destroy a medium-class world. Even existences in the 7th stage of Immortal Realm were likely to be strongly affected by it, and their combat power would be completely lost. But in this mind, the power of this thought was even more terrifying. It was more than 10,000 times stronger than in the outside world. Such a thought rushed towards the middle-aged man. If it was ordinary information, it would definitely not be able to bear it. It was enough to completely collapse and turn it into unmanageable sewage information powder. However, the moment this thought approached the middle-aged man suddenly reacted naturally. The middle-aged man suddenly reacted. He gently raised his right hand, and a 5-colored brilliance was emitted from his hand. It floated towards Luo Fan's will and wrapped around it. With a slight contraction, it completely destroyed Luo Fan's thought that was enough to destroy a medium-class world. After destroying the thought that was bombarding him, the 5-colored brilliance shrank back into the middle-aged man's body. The middle-aged man also quietly floated again. It was as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Luo Fan finally felt relieved. He knew that the inheritance of Tao Master 5 Elements had finally been refined into a complete and inseparable whole, and it would no longer be destroyed by the different changes in time and space. While he was relieved, he was even more shocked. The inheritance left by Tao Master 5 Elements had such a powerful combination of information. How powerful was the body of Tao Master 5 Elements? Tao Master, Tao Master. Luo Fan let out an inexplicable sigh. He slowly suppressed the thoughts that were generated between his mind and thoughts. Then, he called out the inheritance of Tao Master Aurora Polaris in his memory. In an instant, his originally empty mind was filled with the information of Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance. With the previous experience, although Luo Fan was not as familiar with the inheritance of Tao Master Aurora Polaris as he was with the inheritance of Tao Master 5 Elements, it only took him 4 years to gather all the information contained in Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance into lines and let the lines naturally form the appearance of a young man. This young man wore a long robe and a high crown. His face was handsome and indifferent, and his eyes were like 2 black holes that seemed to be able to attract everything. Moreover, even the slightest line on his body, every slightest movement and change, was like the inheritance information body of Tao Master 5 Element. It seemed to contain the infinite mysteries of the universe, appearing extremely mysterious. He also used a thought to test the inheritance information of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. The young man's eyes narrowed and a laser appeared out of thin air. It easily destroyed Luo Fan's probing thoughts. Looking at his posture, it was even more relaxed and free than Tao Master 5 Element. Of course, this did not mean that Tao Master Aurora Polaris was stronger than Tao Master 5 Element. It was just that the manifestation of power between the two was different. Luo Fan did not think too much about this. Knowing that Tao Master Aurora Polaris's inheritance information had condensed into one and could not be separated, he moved it to the side of Tao Master 5 Elements inheritance information. Then, he pulled out the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness from the depths of his memory. A similar process occurred again. With the previous two experiences, this time, Luo Fan seemed to be more relaxed. It only took him 3 years to completely condense the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness into lines and let it condense into one, revealing a middle-aged man in a black robe and a high crown. Although Tao Master Darkness's worldview was grander and bolder than Tao Master 5 Elements and Tao Master Aurora Polaris worldview, the amount of inheritance information was not as much as theirs. Therefore, the whole process was not much more difficult than the previous 2 times. However, there was a difference in the worldview of several inheritances, which meant that there was a difference in the gist of truth hidden behind their inheritance information. This naturally caused a difference in the overall quality of their inheritance information. This difference made the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness much stronger than the inheritance information of Tao Master 5 Elements and Tao Master Aurora Polaris. Just by standing there, the inheritance information of Tao Master 5 Elements and Tao Master Aurora Polaris naturally distanced themselves from it. The two even faintly joined forces to fight against it. In this regard, Luo Fan was overjoyed. This change obviously meant that his comprehension when accepting the inheritance was correct. The depth and vastness of the worldview indeed affected the cultivation and potential of a Tao Master. Although he knew that the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness should have been completed, for the sake of caution, Luo Fan also sent out a thought to test the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness. However, Tao Master Darkness was different from the inheritance information of Tao Master Aurora Polaris and Tao Master 5 Element. It did not move and let the thought hit its body. As for the thought, it seemed to hit an empty cave. As soon as it came into contact with the inheritance information, it completely disappeared without a trace. There was no feeling of hitting an object. Seeing this, Luo Fan was finally completely relieved. He began the sacrificial refining process of the inheritance information. Next, he chose the inheritance of Tao Master Light. Because he was already completely familiar with the process, it only took him 2.5 years. 2.5 years later, the inheritance information form of the Lord of Light was formed in his mind. The Light Tao Sovereign was a woman, a pure and holy woman. She was extremely beautiful, and every line on her body was beautiful. Every single movement of hers was filled with a boundless divine aura, a woman who contained boundless mysteries. After this woman appeared, she naturally avoided the inheritance information of the other Tao Masters. She seemed to be very afraid of the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness. Luo Fan also sent out a thought to test it. The inheritance information of Tao Master Light flicked its sleeves and endless holy light covered the sky. It easily turned the thought into holy light and gradually dissipated with the holy light. It was also as easy as the inheritance information of the other Tao Masters. Then, it was the inheritance information of Tao Master Light. It took Luo Fan 2 years to turn it into an inheritance information body. It condensed into a bald young man with a kind face and eyes that seemed to see through all the mysteries of the endless world. The young man wore a simple robe and stood there. It was as if the endless history of the world was compressed in his body. The inheritance information of Tao Master Light blocked Luo Fan's thought attack in the strangest way. After the thought attacked, it was not blocked. It was not shattered, nor was it cut off. Instead, it seemed to have entered a faintly discernible, boundless void. It seemed to circulate in a certain place, as if it could never reach the inheritance information of Tao Master Light. This kind of endless attack, Luo Fan naturally would not continue. After knowing that the attack could not reach the inheritance information of Tao Master Light, Luo Fan easily withdrew his thought and began the final refining process. That was, refining the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength, which was equally important to Tao Master Darkness. The inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength was not much more than the other Tao Masters. However, its worldview was the same as Tao Master Darkness. It was equally grand and had the same amazing spirit. It went deep into the origin of chaos and explained the state before the state of chaos. Not to mention that this inheritance had other uses for Luo Fan. This alone was enough for Luo Fan to raise it to the same level as the inheritance of Tao Master Darkness. This was because he attached more importance to Tao Master Great Strength's inheritance. Therefore, even though the inheritance of the Herculean Tao Master was not as informative as the other Tao Masters, nor was it more complicated, Luo Fan still spent more time on it. He repeatedly checked every bit of information to ensure that there were no mistakes. As a result, the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength was only formed in his mind 5 years later. When the Great Strength Tao Lord's inheritance information was formed, Luo Fan could not help but be stunned. He even had a feeling that he had made a mistake in the middle and had the desire to try again. The reason for this was that the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength was not in the form of a burly man as he had expected. Instead, it was in the form of an extremely skinny child that seemed to be only 5 or 6 years old. Although the child's body was filled with an aura of power, standing there like a strong and indomitable being, this image was too unexpected. Fortunately, Luo Fan was still rational. After thinking for a while, he knew that there was no mistake in the sacrificial refining process. The image of Tao Master Great Strength's inheritance information body could not be wrong. The figure of Tao Master Great Strength was probably like this. So it's like this. I didn't expect it to be like this. Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly. The inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength was extremely powerful. As soon as it appeared in Luo Fan's mind, the inheritance information of the other 5 Tao Masters faintly felt a sense of fear. Even the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength, the inheritance information of Tao Master Darkness, the inheritance information of Tao Master 5 Elements, Tao Master Aurora, Tao Master Light, and now the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength, also felt a sense of fear towards the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength. It even faintly moved closer to the inheritance information of the other Tao Masters and joined forces to fight against the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength. The inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength was suspended in the mind of Luo Fan. Its expression was extremely calm. Although there was not much light in its eyes, there was still a hint of disdain, as if the inheritance information itself was also looking down on the other information bodies. When Luo Fan saw this, he could not help but feel even more happy. It seemed that the inheritance of Tao Master Great Strength was more powerful than the inheritance of Tao Master Darkness. With a slight thought, he blasted the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength, which was 10 times more powerful than the inheritance information of the other Tao Masters. In Luo Fan's mind, all changes were under his control. If he wanted to blast the inheritance information of any Tao Master, any inheritance information of Tao Master would be blasted without any ability to dodge. However, when his mind blasted the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength, he suddenly found that his mind could not lock on the inheritance information of Tao Master Great Strength. It was as if the body of Tao Master Great Strength did not exist, so he did not know where to blast it. To be continued.